Hello everyone and welcome to Fleet's Random Ramblings 73. In the aftermath of last week's special, we're back once again to what might be considered normality for Ramblings. Once again. And, yep, it's nice to actually be back to a normal, standard episode of Fleet's Random Ramblings. Without any of the other shenanigans that could sometimes occur when we do specials. There we go. Well, I hope everyone's ready for a fairly bog standard and normal ramblings. I know I am. And without further ado, let me get the Discord audience. Nearly forgot which server I was on then. Luckily I didn't, but we're alright now. Okay, so fairly standard ramblings as we normally do. Nothing too untoward. Fairly straightforward. Go as we go, I guess, and see what happens from there. Joining me is Dragon and James, two good regulars who bring decent knowledge to the table every time they appear. Pleasure to have you both on Ramblings, as always. And
thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Hello.
And as always, let's get down to brass tacks. So very quickly, while we have a gap between questions, and I don't know if Timu wants me to wait till Dr. Clark. Dr. Clark is here before we answer his. Very briefly, do you want to touch, because James is actually a civilian naval officer, who serves on various merchant and passenger ships, and I'm sure people are aware of what's happened in the North Sea today. I thought it'd be good to actually have a little discussion on that and what we know so far. So if you want to start, James, with what we know has happened and what that means for, maritime safety.
Yeah, so if people have just found out, two merchant vessels collided off the coast of Hull earlier on, around about, was it just before 10 this morning, UK time?
Yeah, I want to say like half 9ish, 10ish, yeah.
Yeah, it's about that, isn't it?
What were the weather conditions?
Time in a minute. So one of them was a Stena Immaculate, which is a Stena bulk tanker carrying Jet 1A aviation fuel.
Oh my.
The other one was one was a she wasn't a Filipino, she was a Portuguese container ship, small sub 1000 TEU container ship. The weather at the time was restricted visibility, so there was heavy fog. And to set the scene, the Stena ship was at anchor, and the other vessel, which is called the So Long, which is quite ironic. She was transiting from Scotland toward, I think her next port was Rotterdam, and she was evidently on autopilot, because you could tell by her course and speed she didn't really deviate from her course. She literally kept a straight course and speed for the entire duration, from the point where she turned south-southwest, or south-southeast off the coast of Scotland, to the point where she obviously collided. At the point of collision, she was doing 16 knots.
That's a fair old nick.
Yep, she collided on the port side and midships of the tanker, which, for obvious reasons, would have punctured the double hull, obviously spilling the aviation fuel into the sea. Now, from what I remember, aviation fuel has a cook-off point at about 60 degrees, I think. Don't quote me on that.
It's very low.
Yeah, it's very low. So even the piercing of the hull using basically the container ship
Bulbous Bow, isn't she?
Would have set the fire off.
Bulbous Bow, isn't she, on the container ship?
Yeah, they all have them.
Which wouldn't have, It's almost like she almost carried out a textbook ramming attack
Ramming.
from the 19th century.
Pretty much, yeah. Except for, she would have obviously been pierced above the waterline and below the waterline, which is an issue. We don't know if the Solong was carrying any dangerous goods on board. Most likely, it would have been on the upper deck. So, dangerous goods are laid down as per the IMDG code, which is the International Dangerous Goods Code. And basically, most of them are explosive. So that could have also led to the conflagration that we see.
We don't, as far as I'm aware, it's not been made clear exactly who the tanker was carrying fuel for. We know she was carrying jet fuel, but I don't think it's known who for. As far as I'm aware.
We'll find out in about 4 years' time when they actually release the IAMB report.
Yeah, we won't know until then, though.
No. But on the bright side, however, all 37 crew have been accounted for and are safe. One of them is in hospital.
That's nice.
Yep. Looking at it, both of them are not... Well, so the tanker is not equitable. She is 90% out of the firing line, essentially.
I know there's a lot of burning fuel. I know there's a lot of burning fuel right now in the water, but neither ship is in danger of sinking, as far as I'm aware. Unless the tank is already gone and I've missed it.
No, I haven't heard anything like that yet.
It's still afloat, but it's burning.
Yeah, the crews have abandoned ship, but
there's no.
Apparently, Sidodis has said.
Apparently,
Sidodis has said that it's been announced that she was actually carrying jet fuel for the U.S. Department of Defense.
Yuki, I mentioned this to you earlier.
Anyway.
Well, but man, I have no reason to doubt that.
Yeah, remember how I mentioned the whole thing of two ships colliding off Hull at like between 9:30 and 10 o'clock this morning? Yeah, that.
Yeah.
Very big fire.
Very, very big fire.
Yeah, that's going to burn.
I was actually curious how it might have happened, but if it's on autopilot,
Sal's, I think Sal's already done a video about it.
Yeah, I mean,
he did.
I seem to remember it's come up, and I've been wanting to watch it because I've been busy with other things all day. And
there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of intrigue about this, specifically the fact that if she's on autopilot, well, there's a few different options here. Obviously, the conspiracy theorists will say that, it's an attack by a foreign nation on a US-flagged merchant ship carrying fuel for the US Department of Defense, as they always do. The more likely option is that her crew just left her on autopilot and didn't really think.
So,
well, actually, in the nicest way, that's quite problematic, because even if the ship's on autopilot, you're supposed to maintain a watch.
Oh, no, I know. Yeah. I know. I know it's problematic.
Especially in fog.
Because I was confused that... Because I was curious how this actually happened to begin with, because as far as I'm aware, in shipping, ships talk to each other, basically, and there is normally a thing which says, hey, there is a ship positioned here, especially considering the other ship was at anchor.
And of course, if you're traveling...
what makes me more curious.
Even in the modern era, you're traveling in fog or low visibility, your foghorn should be sounding. So even
but also you have all sorts of things in the nicest way. But the trouble with these before let me just finish. Trouble with these ship vessels is they're not usually that quick to turn. So usually by the time you're in that range, you should have already moved. The fact that it was nothing happened, and as you said, she was going for a straight line she's not deviating at all. If you follow the track, she's not deviating at all. That's bad. I don't think conspiracy theories will be right on this one, but I am now increasingly I am now thinking that we need to be increasingly worried about, I would say, crewing on the ships, because in my experience, the merchant crews are run very tight. They're always short-staffed. And if there's not enough personnel on that vessel that they were not able to maintain a proper watch on the deck, on the bridge, and keep their watch on the systems whilst doing whatever else they needed to do aboard the vessel, that's a problem.
Yes.
That is a problem. And that would be it's basically it's going to boil down to regulations. They're going to have to start looking at regulations. And this also, the thing is, I've been tracking is there've been a lot of near incidents recently in the last 2 to 3 years since they 2 to 3 years since they've tried to put in even more reduced crewing. And yeah, I'm thinking that possibly people. I know this is going to cause trouble because people like to tell me that AI is coming and the computers are going to take over. I don't think it's yet reached the point where the computers can take over.
Mm-hmm.
I think you still need the human at the wheel.
I mean, absolutely.
Or at least near enough by the wheel, they can go, "Oh, frigate, course direction change."
Yeah. I mean, I would also...
That parked ship, we're going to run into it. Because, again, the point I would give you is on land. If you drive into a parked car, it's on you as the driver.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, like, regardless of how, the crew of the cargo ship are going to be found at fault. They just are. There's no ifs or buts on that. That just is.
It's gonna stop with the ship's master, but if the ship's master and the various navigation officers aren't able to there aren't enough of them to maintain a proper watch and do the other duties they're doing on the ship,
that is going
to
the ship shouldn't have sailed, in my opinion.
Well, the thing was there are minimum standards of crewing. Now, the thing is, it could sail with minimum standards of crewing, but if you then the trouble is with minimum standards is they are often predicated on everything going right.
Yeah, that's the...
Especially in the Merchant Marine, because as I'm regularly told by people, the Merchant Marine, they don't need to operate like the Navy does with one ship in refit, one ship working out, one ship on duty. You know, they manage to maintain that level of duty. They would have all 3 ships doing various jobs. And that's right, they can do that because they run... In the nicest way, they run different tasks. They're doing the equivalent of a bus route, whereas navies are doing the equivalent of armed response the whole time. There's a very different taxing on the vehicles involved. But, even if you're doing a bus route, you need to make sure you have enough people to have drivers on all the buses.
Yeah. I mean, I will just say that there's going to be it's a symptom of the move towards computing and the move away from crewing. I mean, there's been a dearth of merchant sailors across the world, basically, for the last 20, 30 years.
I'd say one of the troubles you've got is that in the nicest way, the companies have done it to themselves because they've constantly tried to push for the lowest price for crew. And the thing is, they've now managed to make it. They've now tried to push it down to the level at which you're not recruiting enough crew worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
You could afford to recruit that many if you were, let's say, when it was a time when it was enough abundant of crew who were already trained and in service from around the world, and you could afford to push it down to go for the cheapest people you could get to fill in the numbers from elsewhere in the world. That was great. But now you've got a general shortage worldwide. You have to make a system which is attractive to people from the other countries worldwide, not just targeting the poorest nations on Earth, and going, here's earn some money, go spend 6 months at sea.
Yeah.
It's also training as well.
Yeah.
Because you tend to find that the British COC, which is the Certificate of Competency, tends to be more highly sought after than, say, for instance, ones from other countries. There's a lot of countries out there that you will basically be able to pay some money and get your certificate there and then you're literally able to go and become a third officer on a merchant ship.
Yeah.
It's a scary thought.
I know, that freaks me out quite regularly when I read some of the lists of people who are crewing LNG carriers.
Yep. And they're floating nukes.
I'm very much going to be waiting to see how these reports come out, because it's going to be intriguing. The thing that I just have the most issue with is the fact that apparently, as far as I'm aware, the Stena Immaculate was at anchor for some time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I get leaving an autopilot on, but did they just leave it on autopilot and all the crew leave the bridge? Because surely...
No.
In any reasonable situation, someone should have been aware, hey, there's a ship there.
So what you'll tend to find is, in this situation, it's probably most likely, the ship's put onto autopilot. There is most likely, I think, 9:30 in the morning. It's probably a third officer. Third officer's probably walking around the bridge. He's probably making a cup of tea, or he's probably on a computer doing some reports and stuff, or maybe filling out the LSA log.
By the time he looks up, sees it, it's too late.
But it's not exact.
Now,
but it's a case of surely you should have known this position ahead of time.
So, this also will bring into another account watch handovers. So, before every single watch, the officer watch that's relieving must have a situational awareness update of radar and ECDIS being the electronic navigational charts, to see what's ahead, what the course is, what any navigational hazards are on that track. In theory, there shouldn't be any. But it also covers, ironically, vessels at anchor. Now, they would have probably, if they're doing a standard 1 in 3 watch system, so 4 hours on, 8 hours off, she should have covered 16 times 2 is 32 nautical miles. That's more than the range of the X-band radar, which is your India band radar. So you probably might start detecting a ship of that size, based off the ship that crashed into it. You might start getting the echo of the Stena Immaculate at watch handover. But there's also a lot of things that probably have most likely broken down in the situation. One, you're not looking at your radar, which then means you're not acquiring tracks via AIS and radar. So that's one thing. When you acquire a track on radar, it uses ARPA, which basically is a better version of AIS. It doesn't give you the information of the ship, but it gives you the closest point of approach and also some other bits and bobs like course speed and all that jazz. Obviously,
the Stena Immaculate has been. I'm watching the track. I've got my marine traffic app up, which I've been playing around all day, and I'm watching the track again. And Stena Immaculate has been it seems to be doing all the signals correctly, and has been, is on the Marine Traffic Act. You can track it through the whole way through. So this is what sometimes disturbs me, because if you've got the Marine Traffic app up on your bridge, which I'm surprised, I would always hope the ships have something slightly better than the Marine Traffic app.
You won't. It'll be fed through for the radar system. So once you get to the range of a certain transponder, it'll pick up.
Yeah, I know, but I do sometimes wish they had the Marine Traffic app as well, because it can be useful in this case. But it literally is almost a straight line from the Bolong, from the Solong going straight into it. And the thing is, the Stena Immaculate is literally. I don't know what condition they were in, but I doubt they could have even moved even if they noticed anything was coming.
So she has a 2-stroke diesel engine which takes at least 15 minutes to power up. They're at anchor, so they'd have to get people down forward, turn the power onto the anchor, start hoisting that in. That's at least, if you've literally saw and just gone, engines on now, immediate notice, run down forward, started picking up the anchor. 20 minutes that's maximum, maybe.
It's 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It's going to be to get there again, and that's if everything's in working order and everything's not, and something doesn't have an accident in your haste to do it. Because if you're rushing it rather than trying to do it under normal circumstances, that's when you tend to make mistakes and do stupid things because everyone's slightly panicking.
I feel like we've covered the incident fairly well. Can we wrap this up and get a wiggle on, if that's not too much trouble?
Can do, but this is, it's one of the
things
also
not like there's that many questions.
You can do with yours is you can ask the questions and you can go down. There isn't build trumps at the moment, so people look to you to help with the build trump stuff.
Well, yes, that's true, but I do have Timu's question to get to,
and you're so good at it,
and
at hosting these things.
And like I say, I would like to get a move on, open things up to general questions.
Mind if I finish off first, though?
Of course.
Finish.
Yeah, wrap it up.
Finish.
Okay, right. So, final thing before I go, and we go to the normal questions. Every single officer on the bridge of a ship must adhere to collision regulations. And evidently with this, you have Rule 5, which is lookout, Rule 6, which is safe speed, Rule 7, which is risk of collision, and Rule 8, which is action to avoid collision. Each one of those was not observed in this situation. Additionally, Rule 19, which is restricted visibility, was not adhered to either, which is a massive failing on basically basic knowledge of any officer on board a ship. So, unfortunately, whichever officer it is, he's going to be jailed, and so is the master.
Because the master's supposed to ensure their officers know what they're talking, know to follow the rules, and follow the rules.
Exactly.
Just the amount of things that have to go wrong for this to happen is staggering.
Yes.
Yep. Oh yes.
Never
Surprisingly
forget,
hard to crash a ship into another ship.
It is, but never forget that there is an infinitesimal ability for humans to get relaxed and think, well, this hasn't happened, it's not gonna... It's like the people who like to text and drive. And you sit there and go, what makes you think that's a sensible thing to do? What circumstance is it sensible to text and drive?
There isn't one,
but,
simply put.
But there are people who do, and do you know it's one of the leading causes of accidents in the UK?
Mm-hmm.
And when I see leading cause of accidents, it's very high up the numbers. It's disturbingly high up the numbers. And so what probably happens is they probably send a quick text at the traffic lights, and it's okay. And then the traffic's slow, so send a quick text message, and it slowly builds up, and that's how bad habits come about. And once you have enough bad habits build up, people ignore the rules because they've got away with it so often, and that's when you have the accidents.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who has read into the train accidents, Yuki, I entirely understand. I've also looked into some ship accidents previously. But it's just a case of how, after every single time I've read into either a ship accident, or a train accident, or a plane accident, it is very much a case of, I thought we covered this already.
I would say
most of the time.
I would say that people today are saying that people today are brain dead stupid, lacking common sense and critical thinking, is a little bit too much of an overgeneralization for my taste.
I would say it's significantly overgeneralizing it. It very much depends on place, area, and all sorts.
And what I would say is we should all be very, very happy. It's going to still be a disaster, and it's something which I wouldn't wish on the environmental people involved on any circumstances, but we should be so happy that Stella Immaculate is not a liquefied natural gas carrier, because otherwise we would be dealing with a very different circumstance considering how far she is out to sea versus... Well, in a nicest way...
Everyone on both ships would be dead. Everyone on both ships would be dead at that point. The explosive force.
You'd probably... In the explosive force, you'd probably be talking about damage in Withersea. And possibly even... You did damage in Hull, but people would probably be dead in Withersea. That is how far we're talking about LNG. There are lots of other ships around them, which would also be damaged. An LNG carrier is the most... Probably the most explosive non-nuclear system that moves.
Definitely. It's also one of the safest ships, though.
I'm glad there wasn't
This is why we are so paranoid about them. If you ever notice with LNG carriers where they're operating, etc., their terminals are usually separate from other ships, so they can be kept as far away possible, and all these things because of that.
Yeah, I actually agree with what Yuki's saying here. These accidents are a thing that have always happened. It's not a generational thing. These have always happened, and to be honest, they're always going to happen.
Because humans be human.
Yeah.
They human.
Right. As someone who used to watch a lot of air crash investigation and looked into them after that, one of the most common things you would always hear is pilot error due to slats and flaps. The most basic of things of just the pilots forgetting to do one minor thing, causing a plane to crash. And it has happened over and over.
In the 60s and in the 50s and 60s, there are the amount of test aircraft where they try and put it down to pilot error when they go wrong, and you go, looking back later, go, nope. Basically, if it's an experimental aircraft and they try and claim pilot error...
Yeah, I'm referring to mostly civilian crashes here.
Yeah.
Because, actual civilian ones looked into. Because I know experimental is very different.
It literally became a meme in the 50s and 60s. Oh, they're claiming pilot error again. So, does that explain why they're now looking for a whole new engine? that was almost a meme in the 50s and 60s in terms of modern parlance. It was a standing joke. It was pilot error, but we're looking for a new engine completely unrelated to it.
Some bit of news has come out. The Solong was carrying 15 containers of highly toxic sodium cyanide.
Oh, lovely.
Oh,
Joy.
Oh, cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
wonderful.
Whoopee.
So, one thing I was thinking of is that about 100 years ago or more, you'd probably somewhat forgive this, given it heavy fog, but we've got these things called radar now. That
Water
it's
reactive.
going to see through the fog and tell you there's something in front of you.
Ironic,
Water
because I'm
reactive,
pretty
it
sure,
may explode if heated. Oh dear.
yeah, I'm pretty sure Rule 5 of collision regulation states that every vessel should at all times maintain a proper lookout by sight and hearing, and by all available means appropriate to the prevailing circumstances and conditions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking
Oh,
doing
no,
16
you're
knots
referring
in
to the
fog
UV.
is not exactly a good idea.
No.
Yeah, funny enough, Rule 6
No.
states that every vessel shall at all times maintain a proper maintain a proper speed to be stopped in a distance appropriate to the prevailing circumstances and conditions.
So
was
when
that?
you're driving your car in heavy fog and you're not going to be doing 70 miles an hour down a motorway, are you?
Some people do
Don't
it
take us
though.
wrong, I live in Cornwall. People turn up all through the year and decide they're going to try and do 90 miles an hour through the single track lanes we call roads that in some villages down here, and I just laugh. Because inevitably they whiz past me, and then a few minutes later I drive up and go, "So, do you want me to call the police or a wrecker for you?" Because that's usually the scenario. They find themselves in a ditch. It
You're
happens.
going to be. I'm sorry, go on.
No, that's the roads in Cornwall. It's not a tow truck; it's a wrecker at that point because they do enough damage to their car. They're not getting towed out. You're calling in a wrecker. There's a slightly different truck, basically, in Cornwall. You can get a tow truck if your car is damaged. If your car's totaled, you can call a wrecker.
That's a bit of an interesting one there, Gunnery Officer.
Yeah, I saw
That'll be
that.
fun to get
That's
through.
going to be right. So very quickly, I know. Can we?
Now that you've actually got a bit of a backlog of questions built up.
Yeah, let's start on the questions.
We've got to get to Timu's first. Timu Locker on Patreon asks, what does Fleet think that the European powers should focus on in their arms manufacturing to build the things that they are currently importing from the US, that is missiles, warplanes, ammunition, and the rest of the things? To be perfectly blunt, and if I can have a clear floor for a minute, what we need to focus on in Europe is we need to focus on basically gaps, scale, and retention. We need to focus on plugging any key capability gaps for basic independent functionality of every single force in Europe within reason. And in that I basically include basic air defense capability for ground forces, both tactical and theater, basic long-range strike capability with something equivalent to HIMARS or ATACMS, basic ability to fight at least divisional level with at least one full divisional strength force for every single power in Europe, and ideally more than one. The ability to field the full spectrum of ground combat assets, from tanks, IFVs, artillery, mortar carriers, engineering vehicles, etc. Ideally built in Europe. An ability to arm our aircraft with domestic-built armaments of basically all types, trying to, as much as possible, it may not be possible to do so in the short term, but as much as possible to create assets that are not dependent on US components, which is a bit of an ask, but like I say, it's as much as reasonably possible. This is the thing. We cannot realistically, as Europe and as individual nations, do certain things without relying on US manufacturing. So AWACS platforms, maritime patrol aircraft, although there are some exceptions to that.
We can. And immediately, sorry, Fleet, you were right. This is about 5 decades worth of work ahead of us to get to something. But you immediately jump in on things which we actually can do ourselves.
It's exactly. This is what I mean. This is
Maritime
exactly my
patrol
point.
aircraft we do actually have produced in Europe. The same with AWACS aircraft. We just don't pick. We've gone for the wedge tail. Yes.
I wasn't aware there was a European AWACS program.
You have Finnish family, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, look up Saab.
Mm-hmm.
Type Saab AWACS into Google.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I wasn't aware of that. Interesting. Okay, well,
You want
which
to
one are we
type
talking about here?
And by the way, you are also you're the francophone on this panel, so I'm presuming you know about the French Maritime Patrol aircraft.
Well, yeah, of course. I literally that's why I said there are
Just out of
exceptions
curiosity,
to that.
are we referring to the Saab 340 or the Global Eye? Because they actually have two different ones.
Yes, the Saab are actually a pretty interesting group. I would still say if I want to do air control operations, I've got to go for something the size of a wedge tail.
Yeah,
I've got to go for the E7. But the E7, to call it an American project, is to seriously underestimate the sheer amount of Japanese, Australian, and British technology in there, along with the American technology. It is a fusion project, and that's one of the things of it.
One of the reasons this is one of the reasons why I said that it's not possible nor likely that certain projects can be done independently because of the way they've developed, not because Europe can't do it, but because of the way certain programs have developed. It's highly unlikely that such projects could either A, be decoupled from, or B, be necessary to decouple from them. There's no point.
It's just, I did laugh at the exact specific examples you started giving were ones which we actually do have.
Oh no, a lot of it was basically down to, a lot of what I said was basically down to not stuff we don't build but need to, but it's more just the capacity to build at scale and become consistent at doing it at scale.
So here's a question.
Pretty much all those systems you were talking about come in boxer variants as well. So the advantage we have, which the Americans are going to find interesting, is the Europeans provide a lot of truck manufacture.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the military truck manufactured components come from Europe.
At night, I'm
even
sure.
Even some of the American built trucks.
At night, I'm aware that the 340 and the 2000 are no longer in production. But let's be honest, if Saab could build them before, I'm sure Saab could come up with something new again. At least for that theatre airborne radar role, as Dr. Clark does say. As Dr. Clark does say, though, for the command and control air warfare role, you are looking at something like Wedgetail.
I'm pretty sure Airbus could figure out how to stick a radar on a A340 or something like that.
Yeah. I was about to say, that was the question I was going to ask you.
GlobalEye is still in production.
Yeah. I was going to say, A, GlobalEye is produced, but also B, most big AWACS that we're aware of are Boeing ones, based off various Boeing models. Could Europe not start working on, modifying an Airbus to do so, sort of thing?
Unless, the
capabilities of between Airbus and Boeing are not that different. Is it then mostly comes down to what's on board them, where the question is?
I think the airframe matters less than what's on board them in terms of the systems. You can adjust around the airframe, and honestly, there is arguments to go with the Airbus airframe over the Boeing one.
Yeah, because that was one of my point. Is then is this stuff we have to get for America for say from the Wedgetail, or could Europe potentially working with Europe and potential Far East partners?
I will point out quickly.
Still make a homebrewed Airbus.
I will point out quickly. The question asked my opinion on what we should be getting, and so I gave it.
You gave your opinion, and we're now adding our comments. Where the other panel's adding in, and the thing is, the main systems you've got to is the fact that the main problems, and this is what I keep trying to explain when talking about this idea of decoupling from America, is you have a lot of equipment, a lot of components done by the American companies, and then you have to get those systems to talk together. So you don't just have to make the systems, you have to make systems which allow the systems to talk to each other. And you have to get that to work, and that's going to be an interesting project. You are probably going up with companies like Saab, like BAE, like Rheinmetall taking the lead on these projects. And they're each going to get their areas. And the French, the Salt and a few other French ones are probably also going to take the lead. I wouldn't be surprised if Babcock gets some interesting orders. It's going to be interesting. Damon as well could be a really interesting thing to come out of this, because the thing I could see happening, and there are some people who come up with some interesting things going, okay, well now what Europe needs to do is set up a frigate factory, so one country will produce everyone's frigates, and that's exactly what you don't want to happen.
I mean, to be fair,
foolish, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair,
that's exactly the problem we've got ourselves into, where we're all reliant on one country, and that's the problem. We've gone from being allied with a country to being dependent upon a country.
Yeah.
And being a good ally means having a level of independence.
Yeah.
Right. So,
I mean,
I'm just going to quickly comment on something for a sec, sorry, because it's came up again. Knight saying once again, the Saab 340 and 2000 have not been produced since 1999. Might I point you then to the Saab GlobalEye first flight of 2018, introduced into service in 2020. 5 built so far, with more being built. Knight.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also the Indian Air Force that's looking at the A330 AWACS, which I've just posted.
We know
the
UAE has got 5 of them in service. Sweden has ordered 3 of them with potential contracts for more. Canada, Finland, and Denmark are looking at them. France is also considering it, as well as Greece, South Korea.
You can also use the Embraer as a baseline for it, because the Brazilians also use an Embraer-style aircraft with a big-ass radar on top of it.
Yeah.
The tools to build them are gone. No, they're not.
GlobalEye, GlobalEye. No, if you're talking about
GlobalEye is based off of Bombardier Global 6000. They're still in production.
Yeah, we're talking about GlobalEye, Knight, not 340 and 2000.
340 and 2000 do exist and are currently in use, but
they're not able to build them, and the tooling has fallen away.
No. To be fair, they could build them again, but why would they when they've got a newer model to do?
And also, you would have to do some tooling, basically.
Yes, the Saab GlobalEye is Bombardier 6000 executive jet. Yes, we get that, Knight, but it's still a fully capable AWACS.
Yeah, it's a new platform. It's basically...
And the 6000 has been evolved by Bombardier into the 7500 and the 8000.
Yeah.
And frankly, the 8000 literally has come into service in 2025. And it looks pretty darn cool. So, if you want to really use that, you can go. And that's also apparently what the Swiss are looking at, a variant of that, maybe for their AWACS.
It wouldn't surprise me if France pulls a France and opts in for, given how they're basically sat there with their arms folded going, we all told you so, about independence from, basically...
everyone.
Yeah.
No, please don't. French isn't independent about independence, though, for everyone. Please don't start thinking they're doing something glorious and they're making this anti-American line or anything like that.
No, they're just doing
French have just always French have always pursued strategic autonomy for France.
Yep.
In the nicest way, you don't want to replace reliance upon America with reliance upon France.
No, but what I mean, no,
you don't want to do that. So basically, this is just teaching everyone that you need to extent be reliant upon yourself a bit more.
Yeah, what I was going... It's all right to have... It's all right to have, as an alliance structure, nations... Because not every nation is going to be able to afford to field... Like, it's unreasonable to expect the Baltic states to field, a force that could operate fully independently in anything other than a basic self-defense role. It's just not viable. But
it depends on what level you're talking about. Independent brigade action, yes. Independent division action, maybe not.
This is what I mean. This is what I mean. But like I say, it's...
Yes, because before you start being rude and insulting our Baltic cousins by saying they can't do anything,
if you'd have let me finish.
Let him also finish first.
I was going first. I was going somewhere.
Wait.
Yes, you're going somewhere. But the thing you have to think about with all this stuff and with all this, of what we're talking about. The point about NATO was it was about a standards organization. So it didn't matter what you built. There was commonality between the different nations. They could build their own guns, but they'd all take the same round of ammunition. You could build your own artillery unit, but it would all take the same round. That was the point. It's when people start saying, well, instead of being a standards, we should all have the same equipment. That's when you started having problems. That's when you move from being an alliance which cooperates to being a dependency. What you need to do is get NATO back, in many ways, many of these alliances back to a standards organization. We agree we are going to adopt this standard of ammunition. We're going to adopt this standard of this. So that makes logistics easier. We're going to use the same fuel. We're going to use the same bullets. We're going to use the same food in terms of standards.
Yes,
the things that make logistics work.
Mm-hmm.
And we each need to have in our own industry and own national capabilities the capability to support organically all the systems we need for our own defense, and as a group the systems we need for maybe collective defense or support to support each other.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course.
Also, so Knight's point is that the 7,500 and 8,000 use General Electric engines. I don't think that's going to be anywhere near as big of a problem as you make it out.
Yeah,
because General Electric
sure
will
Rolls-Royce are
gladly
going to
sell.
be crying all the way to the back of that one.
And as soon as General Electric says, fine, you're not getting this, Rolls-Royce all of a sudden go, so, you know about those engines we used for your last plane?
And of course, you've
It's like a new version.
Oh, and it's not just Rolls-Royce. You've got engine manufacturers in France. You've got engine manufacturers. Like, Rolls-Royce are not the only people.
If we're being honest here, yeah, but if we're being honest here, Bombardier have stuck with Rolls-Royce for a while. They'll go for Rolls-Royce again.
No, I know. But what I'm saying is when it comes to options for engines generally in the European market, Rolls-Royce aren't the only ones with skin in the game. When it comes to, it's not so basically we're not going to see another. We are unlikely to see another monopoly develop, which is again good for national independence across the alliance, as Dr. Clark keeps saying. It gives multiple options for buyers.
Relatively speaking, they actually do have a pretty big monopoly on it because Rolls-Royce have developed a practical monopoly via one very useful thing: being very good
at times.
No, in general, anytime they've actually sold stuff to people, they've always done pretty well. But yeah, so shall we move on then, Fleet? Just so that we don't spend too long going in circles.
Yeah, alright, so very quickly, next question is... Oh, come on, Discord, don't... That's always the same. Okay, back up.
Discord fails him once again.
Yeah, I'm trying to scroll through rapidly, and it's decided, you know what we need to do? We need to scroll through continually and not stop. I'm like, would you mind? Do you mind? Okay.
Better scroll for a certain amount and then just kick
well,
you back
right,
to the beginning.
are you after the first Discord question?
I've got it. Gunnery Officer asks, thoughts on the proposed British strategic bomber, the Vickers Victory bomber?
That wasn't the first Discord.
That is.
No, it's not. What about the one about the Burke?
Oh, thoughts on my photo of a Burke? It's a photo of a Burke. If you want my honest opinion. That's my honest opinion.
He's a Flight 1 Burke as well.
That's a rare beast.
Yeah.
Well, it is and it isn't.
Well, she could be a Flight 1 or a Flight 2.
Hmm.
Not 2 Alpha, because that's got a hanger.
Yes, I do get arbitrary that Europe is still competitive, but Rolls-Royce is a very well-known name. And is very well regarded in it, so...
1971 asks... Oh, by the way, people on YouTube and Discord, Knight and Gunnery Officer are running away with it, so if you do want to get your questions in, now is the time. 1971 asks, if RN goes twin-engined fighter and torpedo bomber, don't the RN have to deal with the issue that twin-engined aircraft, that being underpowered engines? That's not a twin-engined aircraft issue. That's not... Underpowered engines are just a...
What's Knight bringing up about twin-engined aircraft?
It literally is just if the Royal Navy, not Rolls-Royce, sorry, goes for twin-engine fighters and torpedo bombers, doesn't this mean the Royal Navy would have to deal with issues that twin-engine aircraft have underpowered engines?
Which is not really an issue that twin-engine aircraft...
That's not an issue.
That's just an issue.
I'm trying to know also when roughly this is.
Yeah, but also it just whether or not an engine is underpowered.
The same engine. You put the same engines in a twin-engined aircraft as you would in a single-engine aircraft. And yes, you're increasing the weight by an engine, and you're taking slightly more fuel for it to work. But you also tend to end up with 2 engines, and the the power-to-weight ratio is going to favour the twin-engined aircraft. So it's going to have impact on its maneuverability due to wing size and overall space of the aircraft. But if you're a zoom and boom break-up fighter for naval operations, etc., then that doesn't really have as much of an impact.
I would also point out the fact that what I think he's referring to is the fact that there was a certain train of thought in the 1910s and 1920s where you could develop a twin-engined aircraft of equivalent performance to a single-engined aircraft, and basically you would use two weaker but more reliable engines. It was a train of thought
what I think
that
he's
existed.
come back to is... Fleet, I will correct you. What he's come back to is the whole Admiral Class carriers conversion.
Oh, not this again.
Yeah, that's it. Again. Remember, it's that one again, where we talked about the twin-engined aircraft becoming about because in a nice way, the Royal Navy was always driving for, they would prefer one type of aircraft to do every job. And the only way you could really make an aircraft which could do the zoom boom fighting job, and carry torpedoes, and do all the reconnaissance mission, and do all the things the Royal Navy wanted aircraft to do in one airframe in the late 1920s and into the 1930s would be a twin-engined aircraft design.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so meaning in the first 10 to 20 years of it, piston aero engines were underpowered. Not
no,
really?
No, they were what you would expect.
Adequate for the planes they were using.
Yeah, they were.
It's basically they're underpowered if you compare them to the Merlin of 20 years later.
Yeah, they're underpowered if you don't have if you basically look solely with hindsight. That's like saying the tanks of World War One had underpowered engines compared to a Challenger 2.
They had terrible track. They had terrible cross-country performance compared to Challenger 2.
Yeah, like how dare they not? How dare they not be able to fire on the move with stabilized guns? Like, you know,
it's atrocious.
How can we ever forgive them for doing this?
I'm currently being descended on by a dog.
Right.
And Dr. Clark is dead.
Next question, Fleet.
Yeah. So
I'm here.
We actually do have a question that on an aircraft that I do actually quite like because you don't hear about it very often. Gunnery officer asks, thoughts on the proposed British strategic bomber, the Vickers Victory bomber. Do you think it was going to be a better strategic bomber than the B-36 and B-29? So, the Vickers Victory actually has an interesting story. The whole premise was that as far as Barnes-Wallis was concerned, he wasn't convinced that any bomber extant at the time, or that the RAF was going to introduce, would be able to carry the earthquake bomb he was developing. So, he decided to come up with a bomber that could carry it to any realistic target he could think of. AKA, which would be an aircraft with 6 engines, large wingspan. Depending on who you ask, it was either going to be a conventional aircraft with a high cantilever wing and a traditional tailplane arrangement, or it was going to be some rather weird design with canards forward and its wings more towards the aft, depending on which design you believe the Vickers was more serious about.
Actually, I'm just going to step in there for a sec, Fleet. Actually, we know which one they were going to do because we have. Yeah, we actually have the physical model they used for testing. It is in a museum.
Which
I've
was
posted it in chat.
Which was the one I'm going to go with.
Large 6-engine bomber wings forward, standard arrangement.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, so that is the
that is the actual one they used
brilliant.
for internal testing to see what would happen.
Fantastic.
It's in the Brooklands Museum.
Brilliant. So yeah, the whole point is that the aircraft was basically supposed to be a one-trick pony. Its whole purpose was to fly high, fly fast, carry a single large bomb, and deliver it to targets. Now, as we all know, it turns out that with a bit of modification, the Lancaster could do that job just fine. So, interest in the Victory bomber radically faded away. Had it been built, it would have been an extremely viable asset for a type of weapon that the British didn't... whether or not... to what extent governments knew or expected the atomic weapon to enter common use prior to the Second World War is... I don't think there's ever been a clear consensus on what governments actually expected or when they expected the atomic weapon to actually enter.
That's all shrouded in so much secrecy and so much research that no one's ever going to get that information.
Yeah.
And that's the file you pick out and goes, some components were lost in this flood, some components were lost in this fire, and some were lost in the move between these premises.
But yeah, so basically, had it been built, it would have, ironically enough, given... there probably would have been some anger at why did we build this until the Americans until the atom bombs start being worked on, and then they go, you know, this really fast, high-flying bomber that can go very far, but can only carry a single large bomb, you're telling me we're building, then that can do... Oh, okay, we're no longer mad at you for building this.
Yeah,
right.
I think the final variant would have had a slightly more flexible bomb bay.
Yeah, probably.
Because it's actually probably easier to design that, and then it would have been basically a long-range bomber. But its more interesting thing would have been if you'd had it built and it had come into service early enough, what would you have done to the German oil fields?
Yeah,
Because you'd
basically.
probably hit.
So Gunneroff is asking, would it be comparable in size and performance with the B-36? Not at all. The Victory Bomber was meant to be
more likely.
the Victory Bomber was meant to be 29 meters long, 52 meters wide wingtip to wingtip, and 3.4 meters tall. The B-36 is 49.4 meters long, 70 meters wide, and 14 and a quarter meters tall.
Yeah, the whole thing with the Victory Bomber is that it's a lean, fast, single-purpose
The
machine.
B-36 also empty is an extra 28,000 kilograms heavier.
Yeah.
It is not even close to comparable to a 36.
No, it's not a 36 comparison.
Let's see. What are the
29 comparison, maybe, but in no, not.
Yeah,
it's
wider
not a
width.
British variation on the similar philosophy.
Similar length, 29 versus 30 meters for it versus 29. 52 meters versus 43, so it's got a larger wingspan than the 29, and it's only 3.4 meters tall compared to the 8.46 meters tall of the 29.
Although there is also the caveat that I believe the Victory was supposed to be a traditional tail dragger, whereas the 29, as we know, was a tricycle undercarriage aircraft, and those are traditionally taller.
Well, it's also because the tail on the 29 is much bigger. Like,
it's
significantly.
a massive tail.
I actually agree with RBG that I actually don't think the Victory would have ever went anywhere because in 1940 you've already got stuff like the Avro Lincoln being looked at, let alone Lancaster.
Yeah, well,
So the
the Lancaster at that point is the Manchester. The Lancaster at that point is the Manchester.
But they're already looking at the next best thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Can the Victory can fly higher than the B-29? Not really.
The Victory wasn't pressurized, was it? I don't think. Or was
Yes, it was. But
Was it?
maximum service ceiling 45,000 feet or 14,000 meters. And I just need to quickly try and find that on B-29.
I would just
Actually,
say
yeah,
something
so-
genuine. just please say something nice about the poodle because I think he's literally doing this demonstration.
It is adorable.
Through the
So yeah,
camera
that's great.
nice
It can actually get a fair bit
higher.
higher than the B-29, but on the other hand,
Oh.
do you really need to fly 14,000 meters versus 10,000 meters?
Honestly, Leslie.
Realistically speaking, it's not making that big of an improvement.
Honestly-
it's not. It's a big enough improvement. It's going to affect how many fighters can intercept you,
True,
Yeah.
but it's the problem then of
and it's also at that point how fast are you going to cover that distance, and how long range can you go? What kind of shot can you do? And that's the advantage. I'm getting this away from you before you kill me.
maximum speed 352 miles an hour, range they'd never even considered because
We have no idea.
they had no idea.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's a neat concept, but I think it was
I'm just gonna
folly
very
of
quickly.
the era.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, Leslie's saying, do not forget the consolidated B-32 Dominator. To be blunt with the Dominator, it was a just in case the B-29 fails, and it wasn't even that good. If I'm gonna be honest with you, the B-29 as built was a little had its problems. The B-32 was another league above that.
The Dominator failed in its main mission to dominate.
Yeah, it really.
I'm actually slightly surprised the Victory wasn't a twin-tail design. But that's more something they introduced more for others. But
Yeah.
Either way,
Right. So, next question is a YouTube question from Night again. Oi.
Yep.
Guess what? If the RN goes twin-engined fighter and torpedo bomber, doesn't the RN have to get more aircraft maintenance crews? No. Why would you?
Nope.
No, you don't have to upgrade your maintenance crews. It's still just one aircraft. The fact it has two engines doesn't really change
probably-
that.
actually,
You probably
don't
want an
have
extra fitter. You probably want an extra fitter per aircraft, but honestly, when you're talking about the hundreds aboard a ship and the hundreds of crew aboard a ship you're talking about, if you let's say have an air group, if we're talking about the Admiral class conversions being the scenario where they have an air group of roughly 96 aircraft, so you'd be talking about roughly fitting over a ship which is probably going to have best part of 2,000 personnel anyway. Oh, we're going to find 96 extra fitters. That's going to break the Royal Navy's bank. They're going to cry. They're literally, you can just imagine now the Royal Navy are going to be somewhere going, we are crying over this.
Okay, so on Discord, the next question is thoughts on the Zuber class LCAC. Why did the Russians want a very large hovercraft for amphibious operations? It's all, from what I understand, I'm not that familiar with Russian amphibious doctrine, but from what I understand, the whole point of the extremely large Zuber is basically to enable you to land, I think, I'm just going to check this up, because I just want to check exactly what size of unit it is, but there's a specific requirement that the Zubers had in terms of what they were supposed to be able to land. Yeah. So basically, you were supposed to be able to land what I think is basically a company of any sort. So you'd land a company, you'd land 3 main battle tanks, so like a trooper tanks, 10 armored vehicles, 8 APCs, 8 amphibians. Basically, you can put ashore very rapidly a force that can secure a decent area, and then run away to go get some more dudes to do the same. It's basically designed to be, I'm gonna go in, deliver a sizable amount of men to the beach, and go away again. It's not a direct equivalent to something like the LCAC from the US. It's very much I am a self-contained asset that can do things myself, and deploy actual formations of troops solo. Bear in mind, this is me going off what I think I know, not what may actually be.
They're also quite interesting because they also have an ability to self-defense. Most Russian landing craft don't have that capability, but these obviously have AK-630s, so they have the ability to counter anti-ship missiles.
And they can also bombard the beach before they get there. They've got rocket pods of their own.
Yes. Want to make sure.
Yes. Well, they have Strela air defense missiles. They have various machine guns added. They have the 30mm AK-630s. They have Olgun launchers, and they have also, some of them actually have the ability to operate as mine layers. The difference is these are basically amphibious warfare assets if you're fighting in the literals. These are literal combat assets.
Yeah, exactly.
In the truest sense. They're designed around the Black Sea, they're designed around the Baltic, in areas where the Soviets expected to, how do I put this, maybe find themselves operating in a non-permissive environment where they needed to carry out a limited amphibious operation where they might have to put 500 troops from a single one, or 3 main battle tanks, or all sorts of different options they have capability down in a spot quickly, and each one can land can land multiple of those. So they could, if they have a couple, they could land 1,000 troops, a full battalion into your rear very quickly. And that was the point. They were supposed to be self-supporting, self-sustaining. So they're not necessarily traditional landing craft, and this is why we get into trouble when we start comparing them to traditional landing craft.
Yeah.
Because they're not so much about the ship-to-shore maneuver as they are about the shore-to-shore maneuver.
Yeah, it's basically a way
They are basically a thing which, if the British, if you'd had hovercraft in around on this size scale in World War II, they would have been a perfect thing for the British to be launching people from the UK and going into the beaches at D-Day and then coming back.
Yeah, like
that's their sort of scenario.
I mean, I feel sorry for the Ukrainians. They had 4 of these and they got rid of them. They would be so useful right now. They would be so absolutely. Like they're fast enough that if you if you push the Black Sea Fleet as they have back away from Sevastopol, you can go in, insert like 500 men, cause some nonsense, then come back and pick them up later. It's just
the beach isn't big enough in Sevastopol to do that.
No, it's not Sevastopol proper. It's more just any point on the Crimean Peninsula that you would want to do it.
No. Fleet, go look up the map of the go look up the Google Maps of the Crimean Peninsula and tell me which beach you'd like to do that on.
Oh.
Yeah, it's basically rock. The only beach I can think of is the one on the north of Sevastopol, and it's not big enough to even take one of those.
Could they use it on elsewhere on the peninsula? Is there any other places anyone can think of for them?
Have a look at that peninsula and tell me where you'd like to use them.
They could
the only
be.
I can think of is Zalev. But
like the actual split of land that leads to it, I can see some opportunities for landings there. There's actually some sheltered coves you could use. I know that's all rock as well. Oh, come on! How dare geography not cooperate?
The other problem with hovercraft also is what's the angle of the beach at?
Yeah.
In terms of in terms of how it goes out to sea, but also the angle of the actual beach itself. Landing craft are very cool, but they come with a set of restrictions. It's the same with hovercraft, landing craft, or regular landing craft, etc. This is one of the things again you found. The British used to be kind of interesting in the NATO, because outside of the Americans, they were the only ones who offered a full spectrum landing craft capability, because we had the hovercraft which operated from ocean, we had the LCUs and the and the little sort of LCAs, and so we had this sort of full comprehensive capability across the Albion, Bulwark, and Bays and ocean, and yeah, it was quite a useful. It's quite a useful thing, but each one has their own niche area where they're very good. In certain areas, those hovercraft, those little Griffin hovercraft were absolutely spectacular. And some of the things you could do. I have watched pilots in them swerve around bends. Literally look like they're doing something in Tokyo Drift.
Neom.
It was really, really cool. I did ask them afterwards whether it was luck or judgment, and they went, "Of course it's judgment in the way that well, at least okay, you had a judgment going in there, but half it pulling off was luck." Okay, that's
yeah,
fine.
it's basically if it had gone wrong, the final thought would have been, "I made a calculated decision, but man, am I bad at math."
But no, this is the thing is it would have been a useful asset for the Ukrainians to have. They could have used them, but again.
I think
they sent two to China. They scrapped 4 of their own.
One to Greece.
After they sold one to Greece. One to Greece. Yeah.
The Greeks still have all theirs, don't they? I think.
If they'd had 6 of them, then in nicest way, I'm fairly sure they would have been targets numbers.
Yeah. They would have probably been
3 through 8 for the Russian invasion.
Yeah, you are right. You are right there, Dr. Clark.
Really the threat of landings around Odessa, could you have seen hovercrafts shooting at each other in that case?
They probably would have all been out of action by that point.
It's good enough, because if Odessa is good enough to land at, surely it's good enough for you to counter a landing there with them.
No, the problem with the Zubers is that they're really not set up for ship-to-ship combat. They're really not set up for it.
The one interesting thing that you might have found is in terms of the little island. Oh, I'm trying to remember its name. The Zimil?
Snake Island.
Yeah, Snake Island.
Yeah. That could have been an interesting scenario because whilst it's not really a good place to bring a hovercraft onto, the hovercraft would have given you up with its pier. You could have pulled the hovercraft off next to it, which could have allowed for rapid reinforcement and retaking it with their speed of maneuver. But again, it would be an absolute calculated risk to reinforce that way rather than by helicopter.
I don't think that would work.
The thing is, the hovercraft. The thing about the Zubers is they don't, especially with the Greeks. I do know they didn't actually have to necessarily pull onto the beach to offload. They could offload onto piers under certain circumstances, and the pier there looks like it's about the right type they could offload to. It would be infantry only.
Yeah.
But I think you could pull up and could have dropped a battalion of infantry, or at least 500 or so infantry.
What I don't know is I'm seeing images of the Zubers with their ramps down, but their cushions are also down as well. So I don't know if they can drop their ramps when their cushions are fully inflated. So that's something that
they had. That's the vehicle ramp which you see down on the cushion. Inflated.
Yeah, that's what.
They also have they also have a personnel's points you can get out.
Yeah, this is what I mean.
You have doors and things on the side.
Yeah, this is
so you could get out from here. So the thing I was thinking about it would be a rapid redeploy because of their speed.
Oh yeah.
because they can do they can do 55 knots. They could have done 59 knots, sort of 5 knots across and then back, and with their range, etc. They could have done that to reinforce with 500 personnel rather than, whatever, a helicopter load. But that's the one scenario where I thought they would be useful.
The end. I don't think it would work because I'm pretty sure there's a wreck off the end of that pier which juts out of the water.
Oh.
And pointy things and cushions don't usually work.
No, they do not mix. That is
no, that isn't the wreck off where there used to be the pier on the other side, but where they've now got the pier, that's not got the wreck.
No, there was a wrecked Russian warship there. I think she's a Raptor.
Okay.
Right. So
I seem to remember thinking it was an old pier, but okay. Yeah.
That was a nice discussion on the Zubers. Honestly, the Zubers, nice concept, pretty well executed. Honestly, they don't get talked about enough. I actually really like them.
Oh boy, if this next one's what I think.
They are, in many ways, the host of the landing craft world.
Oh, of course. There it is. I knew that was coming. It's never going to stop to bite me.
If you want to see a real one,
Night
give
6...
us the Baltic, because there's two there.
Night 683.
Yeah, Chinese one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no offense, these hovercraft just sound like car ferries with extra steps.
I mean, they kind of are, if you want the honest, blunt answer, but they don't need to be much more than that. Why reinvent the wheel?
That is the thing. Most landing craft and car ferries are not that dissimilar because, in a nice way, quite a lot of landing craft found themselves repurposed as car ferries.
Yeah.
Post World War II.
Yeah. Listen, why reinvent the wheel? Knight 6831 asks, what was the 1940? And I'm going to ask the Dutchman who is in the chat right now for his pronunciation. Endrak class. You know, the ships that became the.
Oh, you mean the Eendracht?
Yes, thank you. That one. He asks, what was the 1940, say it,
Eendracht
class that the Dutch were looking at? Basically, the Dutch were looking at proper cruisers for the first time. And by that I mean peer opponents for the vessels they would be expecting to fight. Which they hadn't really had for their entire modern naval period. They almost got there with the Javas, but by the time they commissioned into the world of Washington. Like, when they're designed, they're basically what some of the most powerful light cruisers in the world. When they commission, that is no longer the case. But the whole point with the Endrak, which would become the De Zeven Provinciën class cruisers, was to basically redress that balance. They were going to have 10 Bofors 6-inch guns in 2 triple and 2 twin turrets, twin super firing over triples. They were supposed to be able to do no. Yes, as originally designed.
As originally designed, they had 10 guns. It's only when they got the redesign post-war that they had 8 instead.
Yeah,
I managed to find the original. Go on.
Yeah, what they emerge as is actually not really what they were originally mooted as. But yeah, so the whole point was to get at least a pair of ships to basically give them extra firepower in the Dutch East Indies, basically. Of course, the plan would have been to replace the aging Javas. Although whether or not that would have happened, as even if the Dutch hadn't been invaded, it's likely they would have held on to the Javas for longer than they were expecting, owing to the deteriorating international situation.
Because I know there's actually someone on the dry dock who doesn't know a decent bit about this, but those are a couple of ones from the actual Dutch archives that I can find.
Yeah,
some of the information.
But that's basically the long and the short of it. They were just designed to give the Dutch
something. Check something. Dragon, you're here rather early today. Have your shifts changed?
I'm off till Friday.
Oh, well, that's good.
And some of them actually have, because for next month most of them are 9 till 5s, which is going to be excellent.
Oh, that's going to be lovely.
Apart from having to get up at 7 a.m. For now, yes. There's still going to be a couple which are evening, but...
Yeah, good to know.
7 a.m. is not a fun thing, but it's good for you.
Well, no, it's more a case of he gets up 7 a.m. to get the bus at like 7:15, which takes about 20 minutes.
Yeah, That's not so
to
bad.
start the shift at 9. It's an hour and a half between getting there and my shift actually starting.
I've been there. I've done that. Like I've done that. That's not fun.
That's the not fun bit. It just means I'm going to be doing a lot of reading.
Yeah, I've done that. I've lived that life. It's not fun.
But I will gladly take that cost to have, time in the evening.
Right, Dragon? That means you are for a fact now reading Infinite and Divine. You don't have an excuse.
I need to go and buy it.
I will buy you a hard copy.
That would look good on the shelf. But yes, anyway.
For those who don't know, Dragon refuses to read my favourite book.
No, I just haven't gone and bought it yet.
Okay.
And you refuse when I try to buy it for you.
So, Gunnery Officer asks, thoughts on the USAF EF-111 Raven? Do you think after its retirement that the USAF lost that dedicated electronic warfare aircraft, and do you think the USAF would introduce a Raven replacement? Well, the thing is, the Raven was an excellent platform, but the need for a dedicated electronic warfare platform for both carrier usage and for tactical aviation goes away when you get miniaturization of electronics, ability of pilots to manage, or especially for two-seater aircraft, to manage the same roles the EF-111 used to do. You can do the same job the EF-111 used to do.
Fleet?
No.
Then why haven't they replaced it?
They have. It's called the E-18G
Hello,
Super Growler. They actually had a discussion. The US Air Force decided that they could go with Wild Weasels on their F-16s, and the Super Growler would take the lead in it, and it was just a cost decision because they decided they didn't need so many in
the Super Growler
environment.
Yeah, I always forget about the Super Growler. I keep forgetting it's not just another Hornet.
So,
I always forget that exists.
Yeah, that's why I was looking at you and wincing, because
I had completely blanked the existence of the Super Growler.
There's this whole aircraft.
There's a hole in my mind. It's just not like there's a growler-shaped hole. Like it's gone.
And one of the big things for the US Navy has been that they've kept saying the F-35 was going to come in and replace everything. And the first thing the F-35 lost the chance to replace was the Super Growler, because they said, no, we want to keep this capability.
Yes, growl.
And that's why it looks like the US Navy is going to be shifting to at least a two airframe fleet.
Yeah,
probably. Not a single airframe fleet.
Yeah, probably.
Which fits.
Yeah.
It does fit.
So that was, basically, it's the long and short of that. Fairly short question.
Basically, the long and short of it is is money and post-1990s end of history, and the US Navy has a capability, so we can afford to have a different version of the capability. But also, I would say the F-16 Wild Weasel has proved surprisingly effective over the years, and surprisingly insane.
Some
of the things they pulled off.
Yeah, the Wild Weasels just go absolutely mad.
They've never done an F-15 Strike Eagle shooting an helicopter out of the air with a laser-guided bomb, but they've done some pretty crazy things.
Yes. Knight6831 asks, what do the panel think sci-fi gets wrong a lot of the time? Well, that's a very
so broad.
That's a very broad thing, but I think Foxo's actually hit the nail on the head. Scale. I think a lot of things across.
It's not the way Fleet thinks about scale, though.
What exactly are you referring to?
Ground combat in sci-fi is nowhere near deadly enough.
Yeah, no. I'll absolutely agree with that.
For example, in the most blood-heavy and death-heavy Warhammer 40k books, during with the Krieg, and I think it's
you talking about Frax?
Frax.
Yeah, I was about to say you're referring to the Siege of Frax.
With literally tens of millions of men, had a lower casualty rate than the Battle of the Somme per day.
I'm just going to post a picture of something else.
About that?
Yes. It's one of the biggest complaints against Vrax is for the sheer number of men involved and the sheer rate of attrition and deadly nature it's described as. Very few people seem to die.
I'm just going to post a quick.
Let's see it. I'll just finish.
I'm just going to post a quick picture which will also illustrate wrongness of scale. On this picture there are squares which represent the size of crews between the two different ships.
Why do I get... I knew you were going to bring this up.
Yes.
I entirely disagree here, though. Because, yes, that ship doesn't have anywhere near enough crew, but the Galaxy class on average has 1,000 crew operational. It also has so much automation that if you took Star Trek grade automation and stuck it in Nimitz, or any sort of modern supercarrier, you probably see the crew numbers drop to a lot lower.
Yeah, but why build a ship that big yet you've only got 1,000 people in it?
Because they're not building it for the people, they're building it for capability. The Galaxy class can do theoretically, is designed for 5-year missions like the Constitution, up to 8-year missions potentially. It also has enough capability for evacuation. Poseidon said 10,000, honestly. They can get more in if they need it. It has enough capabilities to be perfectly isolated for years with no resupply at all. The most advanced...
Which I don't like as a standard policy, because sending one ship off on its own is stupid.
I agree. That's why I enjoy that expanded media actually then starts doing fleets of vessels where you could say got 10 to 20 ships going together, which makes far more sense to me.
Sense. Yes.
But then it's got the most advanced scientific capability the Federation has as of the period. It has some of the most firepower you ever need. Considering
they could get that scaled up.
In a single shot, or a period of the Galaxy class can fire 10 torpedoes from one launcher. That has rapid fire. So theoretically speaking, it's estimated that thing could theoretically fire in a magazine a clip of 50 torpedoes. And these are antimatter warheads. It's already been said they worked out the average that it's General Order 37 or something of the Starfleet Code, where if a starship is ever threatened by a planet, a starship is legally allowed to use whatever methods it requires to do complete annihilation of the threatening planet. And they estimated it was only something like 40 torpedoes to take out a planet. That won't destroy the entire planet, but that's just take out all forms of major industrial complexes and military bases.
That's going to also significantly alter the quality of life for anybody on that planet.
Yeah.
Because again, while Star Trek is very loose in its levels of damage, that's what these torpedoes do. They're foolish enough to give actual. Oh, we think it's a couple of gigatons.
Oh.
When you actually start then looking into what these torpedoes would actually do,
yeah,
it's horrifying.
It is. So very quickly,
yeah, and that's not even including phases, as Leslie's just pointed out.
Yeah,
it's just reminded me. So, yeah, Star Trek is the whole thing. I agree with scale. Ships are actually Star Trek actually has one of the better things in terms of ship scaling. They're reasonable scale, but their crew numbers could be higher. But they also excuse themselves with automation.
Yeah.
I overall do agree with Foxo's example of, in particular, 40K, where
things are nowhere
there is 34 regiments of the Death Corps of Krieg. We are talking around 2 to 3 million troops.
Yeah.
In defending.
And basically, they spend in the first traditional part of the Siege of Vrax, where it's less maneuver, more warfare, more before Marshal Arnim Kagori takes over, and the Titans show up. In that traditional trench warfare phase, they spend a good 10 years bashing their heads against 2 defensive lines.
Yeah. In a total of 17 years, the final casualties amount to 14 million guardsmen dead, hundreds of space marines, 4 inquisitors, 9 titans. Chaos are estimated in the multiple millions, and Chaos fled the field of battle. That's over 17 years of what is described as some of the most grueling warfare possible where the Death Corps of Krieg are having to tell their men you are only allowed on the surface for 5 minutes before you have to come back in before your eardrums are permanently damaged due to the rate of fire of artillery.
That's only during the big push.
But it's more just a case of even just
but
that alone
if you consider that during the Battle of the Somme, which is 4 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days, and isn't constant fighting, but is pretty much constant fighting, you're talking order of casualties of the British and French and Germans. You're talking somewhere in the region of 1.1 million.
That's 4 months. 4 months versus 17 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like 40k, but
yeah, in the nicest way, you should be looking at roughly probably something like 600 million deaths would be what I'd be expecting in that kind of battle. That's the sort of scale I'd be talking about. 600 million plus.
Because the problem is also, some writers in 40k do point out of just how bad these losses are. But it's the problem of multiple writers in a setting where it's a case of, okay, right, this has had tens of thousands of Space Marine battles dead. Tens of millions guardsmen, other person. Ah yes, the Space Marines lost 10 Marines, which was considered a major loss, and the Guard lost 500,000. This was a planetary invasion! Excuse me?
The thing is, yeah, Space Marines Custodies, losing them because they're very high value assets is always going to be a bit of an issue. It's kind of like when people tell me, but I would say one of the problems is it's you have a similar carry on when you're talking about Special Forces losses these days, and really the worst thing you can do with Special Forces is to deploy them into the middle of a big pitch fight like that.
Yeah.
Because their whole skill set is based on maneuver and being able to use their skill to outweigh the enemy's mass and capability and all these things, and then suddenly you chuck you in a pitch fight where they can't use their skill and maneuver to maneuver because they're in a big pitch fight.
Also, since Poseidon's brought it up, I also use this one as an example. From what the averages we can find during the Clone Wars and Star Wars, there was between 7 and 10 million clone troopers. That's total. So we'll go for the larger number of 10 million clone troopers fighting a galactic scale, well, a half a galactic scale war. Now we have to assume, a lot of fans have to assume that there's got to be actual normal people instead of just clone troopers also fighting, because the Grand Army of the Republic does involve normal people, but considering it is focused on the clones, versus the numbers we believe for the droids are in the tens to possibly hundreds of trillions of droids.
Yeah.
Don't forget, just because there's 10 million clones doesn't mean they're all the frontline clones.
No, that's clone troopers produced total, Moe.
Total.
Yeah, I know.
So a
good portion of them are not frontline clone troopers.
But basically, the clones to actually do the job, even as the elite core of the Army of the Republic, which was what they were, pretty much the crack troops who would go in for the heavy assault missions. You probably need to times their numbers by about 15 for it to be enough for all the scale of operations they're doing.
How big was the 7th Sky Corps again? Because the 7th Sky Corps is one of the most well-known troops in the army. It is, the 7th Sky Corps, which contains 16 regiments, which include the 212th, which is one of the most well-known ones alongside the 501st, consists of 36,864 troops. And that is one of the largest clone armies there is, actively fielded at once.
Put this in a little bit of context. During the Second World War, Russia deployed 35 million troops. One country, one planet, one war.
Yeah.
Wait. So you're telling me the UNSC lost more men at Harvest before Harvest got reinforced than there were clones ever made.
Yeah.
Yes.
Star Wars.
Yes.
Like, I've never seen that number, Leslie. The most I've seen is 10 million. Because we have the number originally produced, we have the numbers that they then agree to produce, and then we have the final numbers set around the end of the war around 10 million. I would agree, those numbers make sense, but they're not what we have as actual numbers.
Leslie,
my takeaway from
those numbers I've seen are from papers of people writing actually how many they would actually need versus what they actually produce when you look at the information they're giving.
My takeaway from the earlier conversation was that, as it pertains to Space Marines, was that Corax is right and all other Primarchs were wrong.
In which regard?
Spec Ops groups using naval warfare instead of frontline grinding attritional warfare.
Yeah.
Yesn't, because, again, going to be the Dark Angels fan who says, actually also them on frontline operations and just normal things can genuinely turn that tide. And that's not just a Dark Angels thing.
But that would mean the one they all should follow is the White Scars. The heavy-hitting, elite armored force that their entire existence is to break front lines open in a very small area and allow the guards to do the rest.
I think, honestly, actually, 40k does it relatively well with various legions specializing in different tactics. White Scars are definitely one of the better ones.
I think my Iron Wolves are probably the best. My own chapter.
I said, Leslie, I've never seen those numbers
Who
before.
combine the wolves with heavy armor, and therefore have a habit of taking people apart rapidly.
So yeah,
it's close at speed with heavy artillery, and then get close.
Right.
Is that
right?
Is that an estimated number then, Leslie, that fans have done? Because I said in canon, 10 million's the largest number we have. I would believe 64 to 806 million as an actual fan number of how many there should be, but I said I've just never seen any numbers even remotely suggesting this.
Every time I've seen numbers like that, it's been how many people working out how many there should be.
Yeah.
And it's roughly, I have to think, it's my own maths in my head, which is basically 15 to 18. They needed about 115 to 180 million clones.
Yeah. So,
the actual figures from Disney seem to usually be about 10 million.
So, your typical gunnery officer asks...
But that is Disney.
Thoughts on the RN-converted Centaur-class helicopter assault ships? Do you think they were the first ever amphibious assault ships with a flight deck resembling an aircraft carrier, way before the USN ever thought of converting or building their own LPHs or LHAs? Well, I think they did. I think the RN did get to that concept first, although I think the US were not far behind. And do you think this converted Centaur is better than the converted Essex? And also the Iwo Jima LPHs? Well, first things first, regarding the Iwo Jimas, absolutely not. The Iwo Jimas are purpose-built LPHs. They are going to be better than the Essexes and the Centaurs. Just that's not even a question that needs asking. And in regards to the Essexes, honestly, I'm not sure what the capabilities of the converted Essexes are off the top of my head, but I would assume bigger carrier would give more capability, usually. But that may not be the case.
Yeah.
Do LPHs have a well done?
They're better because they're bigger. You can argue that, but also you have to remember it's a joint program of development going on, and the British do it. The British bite the bullet first. The British and Americans have been talking about LPH. It's kind of like the LPD program because it's British designs first, but the Americans build some, decide their design some, build some based on design, design they're brilliant, and then build a lot more. And the British go, yeah, thank you. But that was because both nations were sort of working on similar concepts prior to the war because of what the Japanese were doing.
Yeah, but these all of the converted carriers are just, there's no way they're superior to purpose-built assets after the fact built later. There's just no way.
Question.
Yes.
Answer. LPHs don't have a well deck?
Correct.
No.
Okay.
If it's got D in its title, it has a well deck, i.e. a dock. If it's got H, it's a helicopter. A stands for assault, which usually these days means they can also carry aircraft, fixed-wing aircraft or rotary helicopter in attack formation. And so usually you have these days, most nations are building variations on LHDs.
which can give you the one-stop shop of the whole solution.
Thank you.
Knights at the One on YouTube asks, what were the whole 1949 to 1953 Cruiser Destroyer design studies? Didn't we do this one? I'm fairly certain we've done this one.
When?
A couple of weeks ago. Me and Dr. Clark basically answered it a couple of weeks ago, I'm fairly certain. It was basically the Royal Navy deciding what sort of post-war fleet they were going to build, with what types of destroyers and cruisers going forwards. From what
it's not in the list, so unless it was one which I wasn't in, which would be Rambling 72.
Yep, yeah, exactly.
It's not been covered.
Yeah.
Remember, 72 was last week, though.
Dragon.
Yeah.
You can check the archive in the development server.
It depends Oh, that's a good point.
Powder Monkey's been up on Fleet's channel for about a month, so there's a good chance. And you just search for Knight 6831, it'll pull up every question he's got.
Okay, so next question is steady on Fleet. Is a Disco question. Good Officer asks, do you think the Buccaneer is the best carrier-based attack aircraft for the 60s and 70s? Better than the A4, A7, and A6? Well, the US...
What do you want to do?
Yeah, this is the point. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. The Buccaneer is a very capable asset, but it is also a little bit expensive, and it's not exactly what you'd want for... Because the A6 you can cover in bombs very cheaply, but it can still do supersonic nonsense. Sorry, no, nope. Sorry, I'm thinking of the A7. Sorry, I'm thinking of the A7. I'm thinking of the A7.
A7 is also supersonic.
What? Fleet? You having a
None
moment?
Of these are supersonic.
A7 Corsair is.
Supersonic and cheap usually don't go together.
A7 was non-supersonic.
A7 replaced the A4.
A7 was explicitly non-supersonic. So maximum speed is 600.
I'm thinking of the F8. I'm thinking of the F8 that it's based on.
Right, yeah. Yeah, right. That makes a bit more sense.
Sorry, because they look very similar. Hey, kill me now.
No, thank you.
No thanks. Too much paperwork.
But anyway, moving swiftly on.
You might want to punt some of these questions sometimes to the first answer to someone else, just to give you time for your brain to catch up with your ideas.
Yeah, possibly.
That is a trick I sometimes use when I'm worried I'm going to charge in, but I'm not quite sure of my thoughts. So you might notice when Bruce ships, I punt the question to one of the group to go first.
Also, for the record,
are you telling me you use me to check for traps?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh well, welcome to the
Also,
club.
for the record, according to Powder Monkey, there's no
to be fair,
question
if I'm giving it to you, Runon, that's because I'm not checking for traps, because if I'm checking for traps, I usually just send it to Fleet, because Fleet will jump straight into the traps willingly.
It's fine.
I'm trying to train him not to, but he does. He does. He literally goes, there's a trap in front! Forward, dive into it!
I don't mind. But very quickly...
Thanks. I think.
But very quickly, Blackburn Buccaneer... in terms of... Black Buccaneer comes into service in 62. Corsair 2 is 67. And A6, I believe, is...
62.
Yeah, so the only direct comparable aircraft here... A4 is preceding it and is really a light strike aircraft, not really comparable. A7... is replacing A4, and again is light strike, not really comparable. The real comparison here is A6 and Buccaneer. So,
and personally, I'll take a Buccaneer over an A6 any day.
Yeah, especially if it's an S2 with that sort of twin spool engines that actually work.
Which most carrier ones were the S2.
Yeah, but essentially what's going off the 62 model, that was the S1 that has, I think, it's the Peregrine engine. Which means, according to the pilots, it could only take off due to the curvature of the Earth.
Both
aircraft. If it's an S2,
then... both aircraft...
No, S2 and... S2 was 62.
Okay,
Fox, so S1 was 59.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Buccaneer is... Yeah, so both are all-weather aircraft.
Oh, am I thinking of the extended wingtips?
Possibly.
Yeah, so both are all-weather aircraft. Buccaneer, I believe, is... let's have a look.
Buccaneer, technically speaking, does have slightly lower bomb capacity.
But it does...
Can I
but
just
you-
say one
but
thing?
you do have...
Go on, Clock.
Can I say something completely random, which will also give Fleet time to hopefully gather his thoughts and put it into current sentence? If you happen to be on marine traffic, the system marine traffic app, etc., and you look at it, one of the really fun things is when you realize the marine traffic app is tracking things running through the center of Europe. And that's when you really start to realize just how deep the canal network and the ship canal network goes in Europe, and how much city traffic there is traveling through them. And the fact that you can get things to the Black Sea and out again into the North Sea if you want to, by following the canals. If you don't mind traveling along. It's really quite interesting to track them. Now, hopefully, that's bought enough time, and I'm not saying I do this on a regular occasion, for Fleet to gather his thoughts and answer the question.
Honestly,
If it hasn't, then Fox will have a go.
Honestly, to be honest with you, looking at the two aircraft, the Grumman A6 is what the US Navy needed. The Blackburn Buccaneer was what the Royal Navy needed. And I think that's what it comes down to.
Answer.
And I think
That is an excellent answer. But thank you for stating the obvious.
I know.
I'm going to say I'm going to say that I'm going to pick the Grumman just because it's Grumman.
I'm going to pick the Blackburn Buccaneer because I personally think it has better upgrade potential, like they were looking at, and overall it's got more.
Would have been nasty.
It has more tactical capability overall for what I want. Also, it is much quicker.
You have to understand, though, the big thing about the A6 is not the U.S. Navy wasn't really just using that as a tactical bomber. It is a utilitarian aircraft.
Yes,
you could use an A6 as a tanker, and that is the big thing.
And I don't know.
It is a Swiss Army knife for the U.S. Navy.
The book can carry buddy stores, can't it? The book can also carry buddy stores, can't it? I'm fairly certain.
Yeah.
Yes, it could.
I don't know.
The S2 could do it, which is the one most people go off. By the time you get to the S2B, I believe they were looking at not using it because you've now got the big the electronic warfare pod on.
Yeah.
No, but the S2Bs that went into the Gulf War, they did have I think it was sidewinds on the pylons.
Yes, they had two. They had sidewinders and could do buddy fueling or bombing. Gone.
Okay, so are we all?
I'm gonna let Fox finish.
A lot of the boats in the Gulf War didn't carry a bomb load. They just carried the targeting pods, the fuel pods, and the sidewinders to protect the tornadoes.
They were. I think they're
because the tornadoes had issues in the Gulf War.
They were also, they were lasing for the tornadoes.
Also, remember, not only did S3 have an existence, Supersonic Buccaneer, a modification of the S2, existed where they strengthened the pylons and made it Mach capable and gave it more ordnance. Like there is a tradition.
The supersonic one was planned for the the CVA-1. That was one of the key aircraft planned for it.
At the same time, you get the also fun of Supersonic Sea Vixen was brought up, and there's design studies for a much more powerful Sea Vixen. Who would have guessed that these two aircraft would be paired together potentially? And it is glorious.
So,
Dragon, wasn't the Sonic box the one they realised they'd have to redo the entirety of the rear end of the aircraft because it would randomly lose its tail with its sound barrier?
They had to do some looking into it.
They had to.
They'd worked out the designs for it though. They had worked out the designs for it. Supersonic Buccaneer could have been an interesting evolution.
It's why personally I will. So just to fully cap off, it's horses for courses because it's what each nation needed. But I'll take a Buccaneer any day.
Yeah. the next question is from 1931 on YouTube, which is for Foxo, actually. For Foxo, who are your oaths in Azur Lane?
Hood? Just Hood.
Nope. Nope. That's incorrect. Foxo, how do I know your doc better than you?
Phrasing.
You've got.
No, sorry.
No, it's Fleet. It's literally called the doc.
I know.
But you've got Foxhound oath.
Dragon would know Foxo's doc pretty well. Let's put it that way.
You've got Hood and you have Hood and Foxhound.
I feel like Foxo is going to make a transatlantic ICBM flight and smite me. Still totally worth it.
Oh, we don't know yet.
Oh,
I noted it. I was just continuing on.
I couldn't. I tried so desperately, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
Foxhound and
it's not Warspite, isn't it?
no, it's Harriet. One of the Vicky.
The Victorious.
No, the one it's just an open blouse. That's all the outfit is.
Is that Victorious? That could be Centaur.
I'm guessing this is the Ship Girls, James.
Yes, this is Ship Girls.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Ship.
Yes,
this is Ship Girls.
Centaur. I don't think it's Dragon and Foxo discussing their docking procedures. I think it's the Ship Girls.
Yeah, Victorious does have the open blazer potentially, the whole goddess thing, but it would all Centaur and Albion would also work. Yes, so.
Yeah, but they're elves, and I really hate elves.
It just sounds like you would shoot that out, right?
It is.
And I'm saving my last ring for Shinano.
Okay, so the next question is a. If I can scroll up, come on, Fleet. Use the mouse wheel. Use the mouse wheel. There we go. That's what it's there for.
Can I just do a drink check? What are we all drinking? I'm imbibing Iron Brew, but how much stronger is everyone else on?
Soft drink. Coke Zero. I have to drive someone to the airport tomorrow, so no drunk Fleet tonight.
What? Tesco's quad strength diluted. Apple, not Apple.
I'm drinking.
So am I the one actually having the strongest liquid here?
Kind of, yeah, a little bit.
In case of emergency, I have a can of Monster Energy drink next to me.
Oh, good lord! You can't be that desperate, surely.
Iron Brew beats Monster.
Yes, because it's both. I've got both a can of the Rio Punch, which is very nice, and also Pacific Punch, which is also good because they actually contain primarily fruit juice.
Like a some tea.
Why do you want the? Yeah. Why do why do you want the Pacific to hit you?
Because it's amusing seeing it try and fail.
It's an ocean. It can't hit you unless you're in it. Then it can hit you, but otherwise it can't hit you.
We're just following the Dutch example of declaring war on the sea.
Well, as Guy will say, the Dutch are that campaign against the ocean is going well. Tactical gains are being made daily.
Because then you've also got the whole Roman war against the sea, but that one sort of faded, unfortunately.
Yeah, Caligula's little spat with Poseidon didn't end up going well for anyone involved.
Poseidon?
Poseidon?
Sorry.
Poseidon?
Sorry, Neptune. Not Poseidon, Neptune. I know. Roman, Greek gods, different names, same shit.
Ooh, they would smite you.
They actually are of entirely different origins.
Anyway,
still not very happy about your comment about the Hero of Olympus series.
Very good book series.
To be fair, King Canute, who one of my little cousins mispronounces his name terribly, and I didn't correct her before she went to primary school and gave a presentation on it, and I should have done.
Oh
and
no!
That was all sorts of problems.
Oh, I can
but
see
King Canute did try that one, and basically to show that he had limits of his power as a king. Yes, the name is spelt C-N-U-T. You can imagine what little cousin was pronouncing it as.
No, PowerPoint, it's not spelled C-U-N-T, it's K-U-N-T. It's specifically a hard K because it comes from.
Yeah. Next question, Fleet.
Right. Okay. So the next question is, and the next question is a good one. Gunnery Officer, thoughts on the Australian Sentinel tank? Do you think it's better than the Sherman 75 and the Cromwell? Do you think it was the US's fault that the Australians killed the Sentinel tank program? So, to tackle each in order very quickly before I open it up to the panel, my thoughts on the tank is that it was a very decent attempt by the Australians to produce domestically some armour. Do I think it's better than the Sherman 75 and the Cromwell? Sherman 75? Absolutely not. And to be fair, neither the Cromwell. The Sentinel is very much a tank blending together things of a previous era of tank development in order to create a reliable, dependable chassis for work in the Australian outback and in the theatres the Australians are expecting to fight in. It's a good tank for the theatre it's operating in, but better than the Sherman 75 and the Cromwell? No, absolutely not.
Yes.
Do you think it was the US fault that the Australians killed the Sentinel tank program? I wouldn't say it was their fault per se, it's just the Australians are able to get tanks from elsewhere. It wasn't like a deliberate decision that the US made to kill the Sentinel tank program.
This is going to be fun.
Look, in a nice way, fun was having to talk with the my little cousin's primary school teacher after she explained that one of the boys asked if the king was hairy. And she apparently had to keep a straight face in that whole discussion. And my this is the Australians wanted to produce something domestically that they could, and they tried to they tried their best to do so. They did. They tried their best to produce something domestically that they could.
They did well.
But the thing was, in the end, it was cheaper and easier for them to get the American imports, especially the Shermans, than it was to produce it themselves, and instead to focus their resources on other things. And that's ultimately the thing. You're in a resource war. And the scale of production, the amount of effort that goes into them producing a certain number of tanks versus just getting those tanks delivered from the Americans when they're producing the scale they are of the Shermans, was what ends up deciding the program. If the Australians have been having more trouble getting supplies from the Americans, then that program would be built and the tank would probably be lived as a fairly good tank. It's kind of like the Matilda. When you look at the performance of the Matilda tank in the Australian hands, they did a really good job in the Pacific.
Reliable.
A really good job.
Reliable.
I'm going to take a similar approach, but also look at things differently. Did the US kill the Sentinel? Yes. They straight up did, because of one major issue I would say that they killed it with. They went through 3 separate engines before they settled on the final one. The Australians wanted 3 different US engines. Were told about the first engine. They were told, "Oh well, you can have the license, but we're not allowing you to get the production tools to make it."
Okay, then what's the point?
That was their response. So they went to the next one. Okay, right. So can we have this engine? No, that's not ready yet. Okay, fair enough. Engine 3. Can we have this one? Yes, you can have this one. You can have it. It's got the production tools. We'll give you the license, and it's powerful. No, you're no longer allowed to have this. We need it for planes.
Yeah.
Right. So what does that leave us with? Oh, well, we'll give you the... what is it again? I have to get the Cadillac V8 engine. That one we can give you. It produces like 80 horsepower. Bugger. So it's like 80 or 90 horsepower per engine.
Yeah, politely bugger.
So the solution was they stuck 3 of them in.
Yeah.
I think 110 horsepower was what they finally managed to get up to per engine, which neutered its capability compared to what it was wanting to have.
Yeah.
AC-1, I will explicitly... Gone?
The interesting thing about the Australians, though, with this whole program is they actually have some fairly interesting production going on with their ships. But the thing was they'd gone with steam, which is one of the reasons why they have steam turbines and they don't have triple expander. They're not using triple expanders, they're using turbines, and they're not using diesels when they're producing their their equivalent of Flower class, really, the Bathhouse class.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the interesting things is if you go back earlier into the 20s when they were looking at it, they were considering developing diesel engines. And if they developed diesel engines, they'd have probably had more of a chance of scaling down a marine diesel to provide a tank engine than they did with the existing industry they had.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
I will
agree. I'll say AC1 for its time, considering it was first produced in 1942. The 2-pounder is far too obsolete, but they did eventually mount the 6-pounder in it in 42, which that's one we've never really seen any of, but I would be very interested in seeing because I quite like 6-pounder.
Yeah,
but you have AC2, which died stillborn, as Chieftain described it, because we want to make it cheaper. Well, what if we only put 2 engines in? No.
It won't move.
Yeah.
AC3 was primarily the test bed.
With the 225-pounders to represent the recoil of a 17-pounder.
And then AC4 is actually the one which I think would have been good, produced theoretically in 43, 44, which was going to mount 17-pounder.
Yeah.
And that I would say was leagues better than a Sherman 75 for what they wanted it for. The 6-pounder could be bored up to a 75. That's not what they wanted it for, though. People seem to keep mistaking the fact that Britain was actually quite happy with the 6-pounder for quite a long time. The 75 was then used later because it was better in a multi-purpose role. But Australia likely wouldn't have bothered reboring them. It would take too long.
Yeah. What I would say is that the whole thing. So AC1 is basically we need a tank now, but we need to source basically everything domestically because we may not have a guarantee of getting supplies from overseas. It's why it gets the 2-pounder. It's why it's got a cast hull. It's why there's so much casting used in the AC program generally, because it's what the Australians could do to produce a workable tank hull. Because the riveting and welding was used by the shipbuilding and aviation industries respectively, but they had some spare casting capacity going that they could use to construct the hulls and turrets for the tanks. Once the immediate danger is past, basically once AC1 production's going, they go, okay, so we're not going to get clobbered immediately. Let's think about what we can actually do with this tank we've built. And then you get what Dragon's just described. You know, the whole evolution through AC2, AC3, AC4. And then, of course...
Well, actually, AC2 was actually at the same time as AC1. And they were and also the project ended before the war ended.
Yeah.
For the reason Clark pointed out of... As much as this can work, and it is a decent tank at this point, there are thousands of Shermans we could buy potentially instead at a far cheaper price.
And also, we and even then, like we can use the capacity we're using for this for other things. Like we have things we can do and things we need to do.
I will personally
say the 6-pounder when it was, its muzzle velocity was 3,000 feet a second when it left the muzzle. It's going frickin' fast.
Mm-hmm.
It's primarily an anti-tank round, but also it is still very effective at anti-works and anti-infantry roles.
Yeah. The 17-pounder, when it finally gets up there, is, well, that's 2,950 feet a second. So, yeah, that's still that's still not quite as fast as the 6-pounder was.
And the only reason why that's actually the reduced muzzle velocity of the 17-pounder, because they did try the full 17-pounder and found, our rounds, even with tungsten cores, are shattering on impact because it's too high velocity.
Yeah.
Physics said no at the time to their material understandings.
Yep. Ruinon asks from YouTube.
Before we get to that one, I just would like to interrupt and say that according to Leslie, I don't know if this is unique to Fleet or just in general, the paperwork to terminate someone's free trial of life is not that much in the UK. Apparently.
No, it isn't.
I don't know how I feel about that or how to interpret it.
I have no idea what that is in reference to. I've not said anything.
You asked for somebody to off you earlier.
I do. No, thank you. I don't need that.
And I said it was too much paperwork.
It is, in fact,
too
much
was
paperwork.
Me.
Anyway, so, Ruinon asks, Pal's opinion on why my foreman is now leaving me alone. Honestly, from my humble opinion, you've basically caused enough noise that he is being looked at by higher-ups, and is basically having to keep his mouth shut and his head down. Because if he does anything even remotely equivalent to what you've told them he's doing, he will basically be out on his arse in short order.
Or
nice,
alternatively,
Brandon.
he's now developing a nanny complex about you and finds you abominably attractive, so now he can't stand up near you because he just wants to ask you out on a date the whole time.
That's a horror. I'm not sure that Rubinon wants that attention from that particular person.
Eat myself off of the 4-story roof if that occurs.
Yep, figured as much.
I just felt like, you went for the nice one, so I should go for the psychologically damaging option.
We don't psychologically damage people on ramblings if we can avoid it.
The question was, Hood, why is Runon's
that's the whole
foreman
purpose
now
of
leaving them alone?
ramblings.
Not anymore. Working on a different format. Slightly. It's
You
why I'm a
explained
lot...
last week then.
Foxo. Or not Foxo, Dragon. The other one.
What?
The other half of the equation.
How many equations are there, we wonder?
Yes. A lot.
Fair enough.
Next question then, Fleet.
Yep. Which is a Discord question. Hey, we're not doing too badly, actually. We're making pretty good time. So, if I can... this is the only problem with Discord, actually trying to make sure I keep my position, because swapping back between the two Discord servers, I lose where I am. That's the only problem.
You could... Well, actually, there's literally a solution here, Fleet. One, you have Discord up on your browser with one server, and you have your, what's called, actual PC one there. Or your phone, potentially.
Yeah.
Or...
Yeah.
You do the simple thing of, what's it called? Just look at the document. You know, the document that's being constantly updated of what's been answered and what hasn't been.
Oh, yeah, that one.
Wait,
document.
Dragon,
To quote a certain big dumb person. Oh, that document. The document, the questions for Fleet's question document. That one.
Hell, if you really needed it, Fleet, you have your browser, Discord showing Powder Monkey. I've sorted it. Your phone browser showing your personal Discord, and then you have your PC Discord showing Theatre at Sea chat.
Okay. Your typical gunnery officer on Discord asks, "Do you think the Airbus A400M is a better propeller military transport plane than the C-130J? They're fundamentally different aircraft for fundamentally different roles. The A400M Atlas is not a direct equivalent in size and role to a C-130. It is a middle ground between the larger C-130s and something like a C-17. It's just a bit too big to do the same role that the C-130 does. That's the thing.
I'd say don't take this the wrong way. I'd say the A400 in many ways is an accountant's choice because you want an aircraft which it can do 70% of the job of both of them, so we can have one aircraft. And the whole point was you had a C-17 to do the heavy lift, and you had a C-130 to do the tactical assault, and the tactical inserts, and the things you needed to put stuff in on a sort of strategic level. Now, the A400, it can theoretically do some of the job the C-130 did, but not all of it, and it can do some of the job that the C-17 did, but not all of it. So therefore, it looks great from an accountant's perspective.
Yeah.
Not necessarily sensible from an operation.
Yeah. Now, the A400 isn't a bad aircraft by any means.
No, the A400 is a perfectly good aircraft. It's just you do have to understand where it comes from.
Yeah, there will probably
it's a whole lot of people putting their minds together.
There will probably be something procured to do the sort of hot and high and very forward operations that the C-130 is capable of doing. Because, to be blunt, the C-17 can go a lot of places. The C-130 can go basically anywhere, as long as it's not water.
The question
is, go to water.
Fleet, if there was such an aircraft going to be procured, it would need to be under development now.
Yeah, that's a good. Well, there are platforms that can. If we've procured A400 for a middle role. No, if we've procured A400 for a middle role, we can procure a smaller but more modern airframe than the C-130 for that forward tactical airlifter role. And such airframes do exist. Yeah.
And the reason I challenge you on this one, Fleet, is the C-130 is weird in that it's functionally invincible. I cannot think of a great many civilian airframes that are on the similar scale to a C-130 that have the type of rough strip, high maneuverability capability that the C-130 has.
I'm not talking about civilian aircraft. I'm talking about a lot of the... I know for a fact there's at least 3 tactical airlifters in European military service, twin-engined aircraft, that while they are a step down in size from the C-130, can still do the same job it does, just carrying less capacity. And if we've acquired a midway platform between what we would consider a C-17's role and the sort of short field performance you'd get out of the C-130, if that short field performance is still required, and knowing how the government thinks and how the bean counters like to push, it is reasonable to assume that that one of the smaller platforms would probably be what's procured. Sort of like you'd have a 3-step chain.
But
I guess
the problem is you're trying to you're also complicating things in a way, because you're replacing a single platform with multiple platforms, which is going to complicate your logistics. You also got to look at the development of helicopters, which is going on, and this is what some of the argument about it is that can we have air mobility from other aviation assets,
basically
helicopters or whatever, some sort of a VTOL aircraft, as in A10, probably not that it won't be. It won't be the Osprey, or maybe it could be the son of Osprey.
So I think I understand.
Honestly, not a completely redesign of the Osprey.
Yeah.
And the AW, I'm trying to remember what the Augusta Westland version is.
609, I think, is the one that's they've been
609. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I get. I think I get what you mean. Which is you're basically saying that can we replace that final airlift component that used to be done by C-130 with heavy vertical lift assets instead? In essence.
Well, the thing is, I think the problem what you're looking at, and what's coming about is to justify. You could justify to extent the C-130 and the numbers you need it to actually deliver in a tactical scenario, as long as it was a light lift and you had the C-17 as the heavy lift. But if you're getting if you've got a medium lift asset, then it's more difficult to justify the light and the heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
Because you've got a one-size-fits-all solution. Unless that solution offers something completely radically different to what your thing does. And we're currently looking around for a replacement for the Puma already. And we're getting rid of the Puma before we even get it. So basically, it could well be that sort of option fuses together.
I mean, the Pumas are getting a bit long in the tooth now, aren't they? Like, in RAF service, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. They do need to be replaced, but they've been needing to replace for a while.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think, what is it between now? It's between the AW-149 and the H-175M, I believe, is the competition at this point for the new medium helicopter.
Yeah, but that competition's been going on for a long time. I have a feeling that competition will not get any rapid involvements anytime soon.
Yeah.
Why does it look like they're trying to redevelop the Spruce Goose with modern technology?
What are we looking at?
Because they have been trying to redevelop the Spruce Goose with modern technology for about the last God knows how many years.
What aircraft are we talking about?
Text yet.
Let me have a nosy real quick. I am going to have a look and we'll see.
Also, might I suggest, Fleet, that we bypass some of what's called Gunnery Officer's questions?
I absolutely...
Just
because... I agree.
Gunnery Officer has questions 7 through 17 before the next non-Gunnery Officer Discord question.
There are other people in the audience.
Yes, he's had enough. He's had enough for today, I think. He's had enough.
They can be part of a catch-up.
Oh,
yeah.
Exception for question 13.
Why are we making an exception for question 13?
Because it's Dutch.
Of course. Of course.
It's Dutch! So let's go to question 13 now, shall we? And get it done.
We'll get that done.
I didn't have a chance to say this earlier. I'm glad to see that you survived, Mr. Phillips, from your intense imbibing.
How was the hangover? How was the hangover on Tuesday? I've got to know.
What?
There's the reason.
Yes.
That was fine.
There's a reason James is drinking water today. Let's be honest.
Gunnery Officer asks, and the last question he's getting today, do you think the Dutch had better submarines, submarine tactics, and more kills in the Pacific than World War II than US submarines? No. I think they had better tactics at first, but more kills in the Pacific than the US submarines and better subs? No. Do you think the...
At the start of the war, I would argue that they were superior to US subs.
I would agree with that.
You can make a very strong argument that at the start of the war, the Dutch submarine force is the most advanced in the world.
You can make that. You can make that argument at the start of the war. You certainly can. They've been putting a lot of investment, a lot of effort into it, and a lot of development. The trouble is, as the war goes on, they have the small problem of they're not able to build any new next generation subs. They're not able to apply anything they learn themselves, and they're dependent on everyone else's developments.
Yeah, that's the problem. And also, the Americans iterate on their boats as the war goes on, and you get the late war gatos and then the trenches. So the tensions, I should say, and those are very, very nice submarines. Do you think the Dutch launched submarine torpedo is better than even the corrected Mark 14s? Obviously, the corrected Mark 14s that work as they're supposed to are fairly effective weapons. I'm not familiar on what the Dutch were firing out of their submarines to do a direct one-for-one comparison. Also, did the Dutch teach the USN submariners how to sink IJN's ships correctly? No, they didn't need to. They didn't need to. The American submariners during the early part of the First World War they were a part of conducted multiple textbook perfect attacks that delivered multiple hits to Japanese vessels. It's just that the hits did not translate into...
The problem with early war U.S. torpedo gunnery is not the gunners. It's not the fire control. It's not the tubes. It's the Mark 6 exploder.
No, the Mark 14 also has other problems as well. How deep it runs.
Yes, and as far as its ability to actually do its job in terms of I have gotten to the target and now I will explode, the Mark 6 exploder was the biggest problem.
Mm-hmm.
The torpedo would run shallow, if memory serves.
I love the slow roll on that word there.
I think it would kind of do whatever the hell it wanted to, but
because of the vacuum induced by the pressure sensor port being on the trailing edge of the torpedo, it probably ran deep.
Yeah, the poor Americans had a lot of the main problem the Americans had was the disconnects going on between the people using their torpedoes and the people building their torpedoes, and the fact they really didn't talk to each other.
Wow, it's almost like rear line and front line communication is important to developing and fighting a global war.
So
the funk.
Yeah.
The next question on Discord that isn't not Discord. Sorry, the next question on YouTube is from Stephen Mayer, who says, if ships can talk to their crews, what section will they spend the most time talking to? What section would they be screaming at the most? And how will this change throughout the ages, in and out of combat? That's a
Engineering.
Screaming at engineering, yep.
And during
engineering are always going to be who they're talking to.
What about during the Age of Sail?
Age of Sail, the ships can talk to them. They're talking to their captain and their sailing master.
Back in a minute.
What have you done to my rigging, man? Basically.
Yeah.
In the panel's opinion, which of these modernizations of the Congo replacements look better and which looks more drunken? OG designs. So the Fujimoto and the Hiraga. I'm sorry, no, it's not a contest. It's the Hiraga. Simply put, the Fujimoto, I don't like the turrets fore and aft for the secondary battery. Whereas the Hiraga modernized looks very, very nice. Everything's concentrated amidships. She looks quite good. I'm just going to put this up on... This is the first image I really need to put up for the panel to see. Not the panel to see, sorry. The audience to see, I should say. He sells, she sells by the seashore.
Derp Squad, that's not accurate. They did order the testing. They just didn't do the full scope of testing. So when they tested it, it worked fine. But they didn't do a full scope test because Congress wouldn't give them the money to do it.
There we go. I like this ship better. It's just come up on screen for the stream.
So, just to clarify, which one's the Haraga and which one's the other one?
Haraga's the 4 turret.
And the Fujimoto is the 3.
Okay.
What you have on screen is both 4 turrets.
Well, yeah. Oh, sorry, Well, yeah, that's the one I like, which is the... this is the Hiraga. I much prefer the 4 twins. I think they were supposed to be 16s, I'm not sure. Oh, I'm not sure if they were going with... Because these were no building holiday ships, weren't they, Dr. Clark? These were supposed to be laid down...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, these are 16s then. Yeah, these are 16-inch armed ships. And I like them. I think they look very good.
In the panel, we have Dr. Clark, Sea Daughters, Phoenix JZ, myself, Runan, James Phillips, otherwise known as the Shipyard, Dragon, Your Mo Waifu, and Fleet of Oceans, and Mr. Guy, DeLorean Keyholder.
Also known as the Dutchman.
Now, is this the fancy DeLorean that has the upgraded flux capacitor?
No.
It's not DeLorean. It's a DeLorean.
It's a long running meme that has been going on in the dry dock. Ah, the DeLorean. Good times.
I will catch you when you're time traveling shenanigans. Please.
Yeah, you'll never catch me. Anyway, inside jokes aside.
Honestly, the Hiraga is probably the one I would go with because I prefer the 4 turrets.
Yeah. So, Ruin on YouTube asks, if you see one Mahusive ship, are you more or less threatened by it than a squadron of 5 to 10 smaller ships? That depends entirely on the situation. If I am... Oh.
Because I asked that about when we were going over the Galaxy class and why it seems stupid that Starfleet likes to send out a single hull on a 5-year deep exploration mission instead of a squadron, or at least a pair to a squadron of vessels.
They just simply weren't thinking about it that hard.
To an extent, they do with the Galaxy class. They do, the single size does make sense to an extent. You're building the how to put the redundancy into the class itself, into the hull itself. You are doing that.
It's a flying city, basically.
Yeah.
It can sustain itself that entire mission.
That's the Universe class fleet. That's not for another 200 years.
TV show budget in the 1960s. So
yeah, it's why you'll find it's why in a lot of Star Trek's extended media you'll note there's usually more ships nearby. Yeah. It's a case of yes, even if we're deep in space, we can have another ship here within 24 hours.
Yeah. That's impressive. This is one of the first time I can think of in a while that Ramblings on YouTube has exceeded the Ramblings on Discord in terms of audience. Nice.
Also, yes, space is indeed very big.
It's big.
Also, technically speaking, in relation to the Galaxy class is actually smaller on average than a good number of ships they might come across. Notably the Romulan Dideradex class.
No, to be fair, that thing's basically hollow in the middle.
It is, but it's still 1,200 meters. It's big. It's only when you start getting to the Odyssey class and later designs do you see Starfleet ships past the 1 km mark.
Yeah. Enjoy, you. Don't die.
Yeah, according to Mark Harkness, the Galaxy class was meant for 20-year missions according to the original manual. Yeah, potentially, but on average, 5 to 8 was realistic. Odyssey was 10 to 15. Though probably both of them could do 20-year missions alone. Starfleet is very good at making ships basically self-sufficient.
So, the next question...
I can't handle your insanity.
Next question on Discord is Zuikaku, who asks... I don't think I've skipped some gunnery officer questions. Just so people
Yep,
know.
next one should be sweet.
Yeah, keep going.
Opinions on the IJN Late War Venator.
I don't like them.
If you want my humble and honest opinion, why does your ship have camouflage in space?
That's not
That isn't just
strange.
black or dark blue.
What? Huh?
Right,
Who?
basically,
How?
right. Zwee's referring to basically they've repainted the Venator in 2 different late war IJN color schemes.
Yeah, I don't
And-
like it. I don't like it.
I don't like it. I don't like it solely because I think you could have done better.
Where is this?
It's in Discord. Give
Oh
me a
my
sec.
Yeah, I
Good
don't.
God.
Yes, I don't like this. I'm not fond of this.
I will
That's
find
the
the message
green
in
and
li-
that's the green and cream one. That's the less egregious one. What I'm about to show the YouTube audience is the other one, which is this one, the more egregious one.
I
That
have a
looks
very
like
important question.
that looks like the Huts own it.
Right, I've just pinged you
Are
with
you
it.
sure you
in
mean the
case you
green
haven't
and
got
tan,
them.
or do you mean the red and
Thank you.
tan?
The red and tan. That one looks like the Huts have gotten a hold of it and painted it a
I-
garish
The
colour.
important question I think we need to ask is, where are they getting the fighter pilots for this if we're going late war? Just fully armed with kamikazes.
Well, technically they
To
are
give
still
our
pilots,
lives for the Emperor.
Well, no,
Pilots
no,
not
they
going to
wouldn't.
land.
Lost the turret.
No, they wouldn't. Because
What I would say is the one advantage with the color scheme I could think of is if you're landing your Venator on a planet to try and hide it in the end of the war to try and keep it rather than letting the Empire take all your Venators. That
Like
would
a
be an
Sheik.
option because that would, yeah.
Also, no one would be able to tell if a space slug, a giant space slug, vomited on your ship or not. So there's also that. There are some strange things out there in the Star Wars universe. I'm just
I
saying.
just personally don't like them because I think these like the colors can work, but I just don't think you've necessarily done a good job on it. I think you probably could make these camos look good, but you'd have to change them around, like change the positioning of various parts.
Mark Harkness, the reason that they can do that, as long as they aren't building them in quantity, is, well, they aren't building those hulls in quantity, so they can shove as much
Yes.
shiny tech
Well-
into it, whereas the Galaxy was being built in double-digit numbers.
What ship's being compared here? Sorry.
Galaxy class versus some of the more powerful ships they run into.
Oh no. Right. Galaxy class was the initial run of Galaxy class produced 12 Galaxy class starships with an additional 6 space frames built for spare. But in comparison, the Romulans are said to have literal hundreds of D-Dera decks because it is their main frontline warship because they standardize on one design, whereas the Federation has hundreds of different starship designs for different roles. Just to name some off the top of my head, you've got stuff like Springfield, Freedom, Norway, Sabre, Steamrunner. And that's just a very, very small fragment of them.
Mm-hmm.
So the Federation usually builds designs in different regards.
Yep, that's the
Also,
the
the Federation kind of cheats in that they use a lot of the Galaxy systems. They basically build versions of them, but they build them as different things, like the Nebula class, etc. Which means that you actually can't really be quite honest about how much of what the Federation might actually have or something.
Mm. The Nebula class is I actually personally prefer the Nebula over the Galaxy. I actually think it is a more sound design. It's why the Federation also build more. It's why the Nebulas are built in much higher quantity than the Galaxies. Yet they share incredible similarities in components.
So are the Nebulas the Virginias to the Galaxy Seawolves then, from what I'm hearing?
What do you mean?
Yes.
Sorry. Right. I'm not too familiar with the analogy, but right. Because also keep in mind you've then got the New Orleans and go on.
It's almost more that the Nebulas are the South Dakotas to the Galaxy's Iowas. You know, they are best. They are better, but they are not. The thing is, they're not. They are better, but they're also a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
Hey, Crickman, can you all hear us?
Yes.
Somebody server muted you. I know not
Yes,
who nor why.
Myself, because she was hot micing and I didn't want her leaking any personal information because she just got home.
My dog just stole 3 kilograms of cheese.
After him! The cheese must be saved!
3 kilograms.
That's the cheese tax right there. Sorry.
That is not the cheese tax. That is the cheese Bourbon France tax. That's what that is. Like, that is a level of taxation. Like.
Right. Also,
The worst thing is that it was 127 pounds worth of cheese.
What the
Also, I've just quickly thrown in a couple of other ships.
£127 worth of cheese?
I can't
Fox's
afford.
family, probably.
I can't afford 127 pounds
my
of cheese.
brother-
Why are you
Strange
buying
tastes, okay?
127 pounds worth of cheese?
Also, Foxo, I will point out, you can actually unmute yourself.
You have that capability.
Yeah, but
Indeed.
quickly carrying on for the Galaxy bit, you've also got the New Orleans and Freedom, which also use Galaxy-class technology. It's why they look so similar, and to a degree,
Technology.
stuff like the Springfield, because the Springfield you see is very much leading to the Galaxy. So, yeah, Federation can very much do what they want on the scale because they have so much interoperability.
Yeah.
And do these sort of missions.
Absolutely.
Oh, that was the one. That's another one I forgot. It was the Challenger class because I need to inflict more physical pain on people.
Can we look? I appreciate that we're diving and I get it, but can we move forwards, please? Like I'm running the clock down here.
Like, can you talk about something interesting, Dragon?
This is interesting to a lot of viewers.
That wasn't what I was going to say, but sure, Fox, I could roll with that one. Right, so...
no, it's because she's got very limited tastes and then she needs to learn.
Okay, I'm not even going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole. Alrighty then. Next question is a 3-question quickfire round from Lazy Author San on... Hang on a minute.
I included them as 3 different questions, personally, but... Like...
Honestly, I may as well. If just get it done with, wrap it all up in one quick little. Actually, hang on.
There's 3 very different subjects here.
Yeah, I'll say that is nowhere near as interlinked as I thought it was. Never mind. Not a 3-question quickfire round. First question. Blaze Yolthasad asks 3 questions related to Zeros of the Med. First question. If Germany still attacks the USSR similar to our timeline, how different would the various conferences between the major powers be, with Japanese involvement in the negotiations, and what would some of the Japanese demands be?
What?
Can you repeat that again?
If Germany still attacks the USSR, similarly to our timeline in Dr. Clark's timeline Zeros over the Med, how different would the various conferences between the major powers be, with Japanese involvement in the negotiations? So Yalta, Malta, etc. The various conferences that take place. And what would some of the Japanese would some of the Japanese demands be?
That's such a completely different scenario, especially if you're using the Zeros of Malta where the Japanese have joined in. There's honestly a scenario of, well, Italy's probably been knocked out the war pretty darn quickly. With the Japanese fleet coming and assisting in the Mediterranean, the Italian fleet is not going to survive for long in that scenario. Any kind of force of Japanese turning up is going to tip that balance
very quickly.
And so then that's going to completely change the metric.
Did you knock Italy out with the revolution, or did you knock Italy out with Mussolini going for status quo ante? I can't remember.
Hang on a second. When does Japan join the war in the first place?
If I remember correctly, Zeros over the Mediterranean, the scenario was that Japan joined. Basically, Yonai is still in. Yonai pushes for joining the war and is in power and chooses to join the war on the British side as a way to get Japan its power and presence in the world rather than going to war against the Americans, etc.
They're still bullying China, though, I think.
They're still bullying China, yes, but in the nicest way, don't take us the wrong way, but in that scenario, if the Japanese join the British and suddenly declare war on side of the British and say they will come fight alongside them, the British probably view on China will be a lot of realpolitik.
About face.
And also, to be fair, let's not forget the major blockades coming after Indochina is annexed rather than the Chinese war.
Yeah.
Like, the US is still, we don't like you doing this, Japan, but as long as you stay in China, we're fine. Oh, you've taken Indochina. Right, that's it. Here comes the embargo.
Yeah, no, my question is more is Japan joined after the invasion of Poland or
after the invasion of
Poland?
After the invasion of Poland.
It's after the invasion. It's after the fall of France. Yes.
Only after the fall of France.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Basically, France falls and Yonai goes. Britain, would you like an ally? We're declaring war on your side to support our traditional ally.
A little bit of real politics.
So that means that means at Taranto you have a dawn strike of Japanese aircraft coming in after the British strike at night.
Ooh.
Yeah. Honestly, I think frankly, I mean, I guess it probably depends on how long it would take to get the Japanese set up logistically at Gibraltar. But like, frankly, I think it would happen earlier. I think the Italians, like, if you think about some of the major battles in the summer before Taranto, I think it would have actually happened sooner.
It was launched for Alexandria, and the reason it takes the time it does to get it in is because the Italians don't declare war. That's the delay.
If the Italians are in the war to go after the French, then frankly, I don't think they're going to join the war at all, unless the Japanese.
The Italians joined the war. The Italians joined the war just before the French fall out, and then it takes a while for the British to cite the logistics and the things to go through. But also, even if you have the Japanese trying to come more quickly, A, it's going to take them time for them to deploy assets, and B, it's going to take time to coordinate assets. So basically, you end up with roughly a Taranto strike. It might not be, as I put in it might actually be the original date for Taranto, which was planned for October rather than November. But it'll be about the same time. Because it's also things of getting the things in place. But basically, you'd end up with probably a 1-2 British carrier formation doing a night strike, and then in the dawn, whatever Japanese carriers there, if they've deployed 1 or 2, launching a strike, and bye-bye Italian fleet, and that basically knocks the Italians out the war, because the Italians, if their entire fleets are wiped out in that kind of operation, then the North African campaign is probably dealt with quite quickly, because their supplies will be cut off, and so it's logistics, bye-bye. And basically, the North African campaign, the Italians can't... Please don't... this is one of the things which often gets me into trouble, is because I go, well, if you run out of supplies, if you have no supplies coming through because the sea's being taken over, your campaign is going to fold. And people go, no, they're going to fight honourably and bravely. They probably will do. But they're going to run out of bullets and food.
Water.
And that makes fighting them rather easy. If they're armed with armed with bayonets and you're armed with rifles with bullets, the battle doesn't tend to go well for you.
Mm-hmm.
There's
no way to hold North Africa more than longer than half a year without more supplies, frankly, and they could be mopped up faster because the fuel supplies would run out, and then you have no way to get reinforcements to North Africa too, which the Italians were also doing in that period. I mean, it'd just be toast.
Which does mean, though, that you have Rommel to head the German invasion of Russia if they decide to still go that. But my view was,
jolly good.
If Italy's knocked out that quickly, do they still do an invasion of the Soviet Union, or are they trying to negotiate dramatically? Because the Mediterranean, what the Mediterranean dealt with, and now British and Japanese forces sitting there waiting for any German vessels to come out to sea, it's kind of a ooch. What do we do?
I mean, I think you're making the issue there of assuming that the Nazis were rational actors.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's Hitler's Germany. He's gonna go and fight the Russians. It's just...
And it's a case of the Soviets aren't an ideological enemy. For the Nazis, they were an existential enemy.
Back to the original
they still
question.
might well go and invade them, but they might also try and sue for peace.
Back to the original question, I think if Tokyo has a seat at those conferences, they are going to negotiate for more territory at the Russo-Japanese war border. Because I think they kind of got their butts handed to them in the 1930s edition of that war.
I think what you might see is them in nicest way, especially under those scenarios, is they might be given some parts of the Italian Empire.
Italian East Africa.
I mean, the Italian concessions in China are completely toasted if this timeline goes through. So those are gone.
Not the concessions in China. Those are gone. Yes, but I was thinking more maybe sort of Potentially, although the British won't like having another power in the Indian Ocean, having the Japanese in the Indian Ocean stretches their forces out far more than it does anyone else. So giving them East Africa gives them some nice red on the map, but doesn't really give them anything useful.
I can see them getting. I can see them getting ports.
Japanese Somaliland.
No, I can see them. I can see them getting ports.
Why would the
why
would the British bother? Because I mean, the Japanese are already willing to be involved in the war in the first place. How much do they really need the gravy train to keep going?
Like it's basically like we're already
versus just occupying it yourself. I mean.
China.
Well, because the British don't want it. The British don't want it. That's the thing.
Dr. Clark, China.
Yeah.
That's the big gravy train here. The Japanese war in China and whatever they get out of that is basically everyone is turning a blind eye to it. That's the big win here. Is the Allies?
Yeah, and also you have to remember the scenario which I did talk through and I did say was if the Japanese joined the war on the British side at that point in the war, the Americans become more boxed in than ever, because the worst thing for the Americans is to face a British Empire-Japanese alliance in the Pacific.
Yeah.
That's the scenario the Americans didn't want to fight, because the Americans do have great resources, but the Americans also had great nightmares at this time. And the Washington Treaty had arguably been very useful for the British in getting rid of the Anglo-Japanese Treaty when the Japanese were turning more annoying. But in this scenario, there are going to be a lot of people in the American State Department, etc., who are going to be worried about a renewed Anglo-Japanese treaty and are going to be worried what that could mean. So they probably want to join the war to make sure that they are part of that treaty. Because having Japan on one side fighting Pacific War is one thing. Having Japan on one side and the British Empire all around you on the other side does complicate your war matters. Yes, you might well still win because you have internal lines of logistics and huge amount of resources to tap. But it's going to be a lot messier.
Mark Harkness says on YouTube is saying that if Japan goes that way, Germany is screaming and promising Chang, I can say the guy's name, all the help he can give them. That makes Japan's China policy easier for the US, UK to swallow. The problem is Germany can't really project forces out of Europe and North Africa.
They can give them nout.
And also, I would argue that if Chang decides to pick up arms in support of Hitler versus Russia,
as part of the whole wider Chinese Civil War,
Mao might take issue with that, and the handshake agreement of we will not engage in open fighting until we kick the Japanese out may completely disintegrate.
Yeah, so I think in the case of the communist Chinese, they don't really have
the actual fighting
exactly
against the Japanese anyway.
They were very much on the back foot for most of World War II. They kind of used that to help recover because they were doing less of the fighting versus the nationalists. Which helped them position themselves to the recontinuation of the Civil War.
Yeah. So the next
isn't the whole thing with Chiang
Kai-shek?
Weren't a lot of the I don't want to say professional.
The pre-war army?
Yeah, a lot of that was German trained, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was. The German the nationalists had backing from the Germans, and actually the Italians were also favorable to the nationalists. There was actually some diplomatic incidents before the war because the Japanese accidentally bombed an Italian cruiser in China. But that aside, yeah, the best nationalist divisions were trained by the Germans, though they were also largely destroyed in the battle for Nanking, or before Nanking.
Yeah.
Or Shanghai. I actually forget. I think it might have been Shanghai, actually. Sorry.
Beijing?
I need to brush. No, it was Beijing. It wasn't Beijing. I need to brush up on my pre-war
it was Nanjing.
Chinese conflict history, but
so it makes sense for the Germans to promise continued officer support and training support.
Yeah, von Falkenhausen will basically never be recalled.
In this, they don't really have the ability to spare any resources in this scenario. So,
yeah,
but that's all they can offer, which isn't much.
Yeah. YouTube, Paul Amos asked, how does the panel see British naval infrastructure developing or not over the next 10-15 years? Honestly, the current progression we're on will basically just be accelerated. if anything happens at all. Like the current progression we're on, where we're looking towards. I mean, I can't see anything different than that, Alex. Given that we're already looking to regenerate our shipbuilding industry anyway, given what we're building, and more.
Well, the only big differential you have potentially is the SMP doing something interesting, but that's the only problem you have.
Yeah, but even with the extra money going around, I can't see much more apart from you might stand up another line of frigate production. But that would probably be
not
even.
Honestly, as I say, basically you just need to use the lines at the capacity they have. It's like we have a submarine yard which only uses 2/3 of its capacity.
Yeah.
We have 2 frigate yards which are running at about 40% of capacity in terms of what they could be doing their throughput, because they are. One of the things is we pay them to have capacity above that which we've needed, because as part of the build procurement process, so that if we ever needed to regenerate, we could regenerate, is the theory.
So now, in theory,
it was cheaper to pay. Yeah, but then they're going to have to increase recruitment and all sorts of things, and the money's going to have to be built in, and yeah.
Yeah, I would say, I think generally speaking, when we're looking at the current horizon of increased spending, so for example, the ambition to 2.5% of GDP, that's a lot of that money is going to be more about backfilling existing capabilities to make them actually able to meet the standards that they're supposed to at this point in time. And then if spending past that point will be more about potentially increasing forces down the line, but there's a lot of programs and a lot of things that just need more help than they currently have.
I think the focus of spending, if you're being sensible, is not going to be to increase the number of programs or add any new programs. It's going to be actually put the money into the existing programs. I wouldn't mind seeing a longer term increase in the number of Type 26s, Type 32s, etc. being actually ordered and all these things. But yeah, it's going to take time. Type 32s, I've already heard discussions of that being maybe pushed up to 7 when they make that. But basically, the 30s are batches of Type 31 is batch 1, Type 32 is batch 2 of that class, and then it'll be batch 3 probably. And that's the sort of long-term ideas. But there's all sorts of weird, interesting discussions if you spend enough time with the Ministry of Defence, the House of Commons, and the various think tanks around it. You'll walk away from every different meeting with about 3 dozen different ideas of what they have, and nothing which is a concrete plan.
Fantastic.
So yeah, it's fun.
The next question from Lazy Author is, again, it was said in the video.
James, I think James. Fleet. James was saying something.
Sorry, James. What did you say?
Thank you, Dr. Clark. I think extra 83s might also come in handy.
Oh, they would be lovely, but they haven't even. In the nicest way, the last time I had a conversation with someone about that who wears far more gold braid than I will ever wear, they haven't even worked out the final specifications of what they want for that yet. So, a nice way, when you haven't even got a specification, you certainly can't order it. I'd like them to, though, because you need them. And I'd also like it to be a policy that you actually got 2 or 3 into service before you start retiring Type 45s to give us enough cover.
Yeah.
We can always hope for sensibility.
Yeah. So, Lazy Author asks, it was said in the video that World War II might end as early as 1943. How would that affect the American elections of 1944 and 52, since Eisenhower might not become as famous as the original timeline? Please, everyone take a crack at that. I'm actually keeping my mouth shut because I do not know enough on this.
In that scenario, MacArthur actually might become president.
Oh dear God!
That's the rum.
Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
It's a possibility. There's also it's a probability it would be whoever was managed to make themselves famous in that scenario, and whoever achieved the capabilities. It's like, who's the admiral they send to take charge of the forces if they send a navy out there and to take part in the Allied operations, or is Eisenhower sent still, or is it Patton, or what happens to the various domestic policies? How does Roosevelt's health hold up to it with a very different health scenario? And what's the risk of conflict between America and Japan post that? I said it was probably able to be managed by Yonai because he really didn't want war with the Americans because he thought that would be an existential crisis and stupid. But, it's an interesting case to work through. It's going to change things sufficiently enough that no one can really predict who's going to become the leader. Because if we consider... Think about your own recent politics.
think about how the leaders have come about. They often have come from relatively nowhere, built themselves up, and are suddenly a political leader. And it'll be an incident or something which will give them the necessary national understanding or view of them to give them a platform that they can therefore project themselves to be a leader. This scenario would create so many different complexities and so many different situations. It's who takes advantage of them. And as I said, it could be MacArthur.
No.
You're telling me it could be President James Dean.
It could be President James Dean.
Why can't it be President Halsey?
It could also be President Patton.
No!
I'll take it.
I will not.
I don't know. I'm seeing a pattern with all these bad candidates.
Okay, moving on. Next question. Moving on. Next question is from YouTube, which is 96831. If the BAE Harrier 2 FGR-11, which is a Harrier 2... Hang on, okay. If the BEA Harrier 2 FGR-11, which is a Harrier 2 GR-9 with the Sea Harrier F2A Blue Vixen radar was built, how much does that extend the life of the Harrier 2? If you want the...
Probably gives you till the F-35 comes into service, that's probably it. That buys the time till the F-35 comes into service.
I mean, I think that the fundamental thing is always going to be: does the British, does the RAF have to make the choice between the Tornado fleet and the Harrier fleet, and which one is it going to axe in that scenario? I think is always.
It's always going to be the Harrier fleet. It's always going to be the Harrier fleet.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Unfortunately, the Tornadoes are much more useful.
Yeah.
She's
now,
right,
if
you
the
know.
RAF did not have a say over the Royal Navy's aircraft, that might be a different story, but...
Yeah. The thing is, the only way that would have got procured is if the Royal Navy were doing a separate procurement. So if the Royal Navy was still running 3 squadrons of their own aircraft, and they were given the budget, then they'd have got that. And then what probably would have happened in any scenario is the Royal Navy would get told to up their squadrons to 4, take on some of the RAF pilots, and so RAF's RAF thing goes away.
We got gradually fading. Yeah, we got faded to the distance, Dr. Clark. There.
Fading into the distance. Sorry, the poodle wanted to go garden again, so he went in garden. But I think he might be going garden just literally to get a biscuit right now. But the scenario, so I had to go close door. But I would say the scenario is that if the Royal Navy has those sort of 3 squadrons, then when you're looking at getting rid of the Harrier fleet for the RAF, and if the Navy's being allowed to keep their fleet, then possibly what happens is the Royal Navy gets to up their fleet to 4 squadrons, so that there's an extra Royal Navy squadron, and the RAF get rid of theirs. And that then fills all the roles for the Harriers that they need. But that's be a scenario where the Royal Navy's kept their Harriers, in which case that's a very different policy for the carriers. And that's going to change things differently. That's basically what I would call Britain comes out of the Falklands War with a desire that it's never going to be without carrier aviation ever again, and will never drop below a certain number of being able to put at least 12 Harriers per carrier in any scenario.
Yeah.
But so would it actually keep them on this? Because I thought the main reason they were retired was budgetary constraint. Is the official reason they were given. So
yeah, but like I
and
say,
these ones could potentially be more expensive in some regard.
Yeah, like I say, it would require the British having a certain mindset, which Dr. Clark just said. You basically have to bypass budget in that case. So very quick.
No, you have the money. Please do not get wrong. They had the money. It's how you prioritize what you're spending the money on. This is one of the things you have to often think about with British defence. And all these things is there is a judgment made on terms of priorities. You have the defence priorities, but you also have the political priorities tend to be above them as well. And the funding will go where it's where the priorities will dictate it will go. And that doesn't. And so, if the political priority had come out from the Falklands War, that as the politicians would always believe that Britain had to maintain carrier capability, carrier air defence, carrier strike in order to be a viable nation and in order for security, and that was a British political mindset for the politicians. You would have had that as a scenario, but you'd also probably have that under that scenario. HMS Ocean would have been built as a LHA with a ski ramp as well as the ability to take, so that she could take Harriers as well as act as an amphibious ship.
Yeah,
and you'd have had all sorts of different things happen over the time with that.
Yeah,
and Albion Bulwark would probably been LHDs.
Yeah.
Again, so they could have Harriers operating from ski ramps.
Yeah. Question 3 in the final of Lazy Authors trio. Dr. Clark, James, did you have something to say?
Yeah, let's clear my throat.
Dr. Clark, in one
He's
of your
wishing he had rum
videos,
currently.
you mentioned that the US begrudgingly took over the role of maintaining freedom of the seas from the Royal Navy at the end of World War II. In the situation that a still ambitious Japan and strong-eyed Jen exist post-war, would the US just let Japan take over that role in the Pacific, or would the US compete with them over influence? Well, absolutely the US would compete with them.
No. The US would compete with them over influence. So basically, the US were annoyed with having to take it over. The US wanted to take it over to the Pacific. They weren't prepared to have to take it over in the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean as well.
Yeah, because bear in mind, the Japanese are not that interested in freedom of the seas. They're interested in, these are our waters. This is our backyard. Yeah. We're not interested in freedom of navigation. We're interested in, this is our backyard.
There is you have to remember, freedom of the seas depends a lot on what your perspective. It's a very curiously, and this gets me into trouble, but it's a curiously Anglo-centric perspective.
It really is.
In terms of Anglophonic.
It really is.
To have freedom of seas the way it has evolved into.
Yeah, it really is.
I'm not taking that as being British. I'm saying it's British, American, Australian, Canadian, to an extent, those sort of scenarios. But also, I would say, when you look at some nations' approach to it, some nations started off that way. India would have certainly taken on the role for the Indian Ocean when they first went independent. I'm not sure if a modern India which has got a lot more protectionist than they started out, would have the same freedom of seas mentality of we are maintaining freedom of seas for everyone to travel wherever they want scenario. And that's me just on my own judgment looking at it, looking at what their government pronouncements have been. But also they might have done, because I think if you'd had a freedom of seas scenario where it was far more of a collective freedom of seas come out of World War II, it would have been interesting, but you'd have probably ended up with a scenario where even if you'd had the superpowers come into the world, they would have found themselves far more fettered in terms of their abilities, because it would be a case of, yes, you have nuclear weapons, yes, you're the superpowers and it can break the world, but unless you're going to threaten to nuke every single time someone disagrees with you, in which case you look kind of like a little baby going, you won't let me play with your chocolate, so I'm going to hit you over the head with this sledgehammer, sort of thing, on a national level. You kind of end up having to work with people. It's one of the joys of conventional deterrence when you study it and you start working through conventional deterrence. A lot of the times, the nuclear powers find themselves boxed into corners by conventional powers if they are smart about how they apply their power. And so, under a scenario where you have a collective nation, individual nations sort of taking on, we're going to provide freedom of seas in the Indian Ocean, we're going to provide freedom of seas here, 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 and it dividing up, and each being sort of responsible for policing their areas and providing it. It is an interesting scenario for how it would complicate the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't think it would evolve the same way as it has today.
Because you better believe that the Japanese alliance with the British is going to last all of 5 seconds.
In the nicest way, when people talk about China taking over freedom of seas and becoming the dominant power of the sea power, the Chinese perspective on sea power and freedom of seas is very different.
Yeah,
very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
I always find it slightly annoying when people try and say that's saying people are lesser or greater than others. I'm going, no, it's different, and that's the important thing.
The Japanese are building their navy.
Doesn't mean it's less or better. It means it's different.
The Chinese, the People's Liberation Army Navy is being built up as a sea control force. It's being built up to control the seas they need it to control to conduct the operations they want to conduct. That being breaking out through the first island chain and an assault on Taiwan, plus possibly also controlling down to the Philippine Sea and up to Japan. For that, they need a large conventional navy. They are not building that navy to go and secure freedom of navigation all around the world. They don't need to. Other people do it for them.
At the moment.
Yeah. That may change, but we'll see what happens. I can't pronounce that name.
James?
Sorry, go on, James.
Wait, you can pronounce James, can't you?
No, not James. But carry on, James.
You know, China's making bases in multiple different countries around the Indian? Jesus, I can't speak. Indian Ocean.
Yes.
So, for example, Djibouti, which one obviously lets them use the NEF or Naval Expeditionary Force Task Group near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. There we are. Can't remember the name of the place. You know, they're also investing in other places around that area to actually use as force projection.
Yeah, I know they are.
So I'd actually say they're probably more akin to going further towards the African coast.
Yeah, you're probably right there. You are probably right.
Which is what's causing the problem with the Indians at the moment.
Yeah.
The Indians aren't keen on it, especially with the whole issues going on their border with the Indian and Chinese border, which keeps moving.
This way. Oh, we're going this way, that way, forward, backwards, over the Himalayas. Hey. But very quickly.
You know, it also is the character of medieval combat.
Yeah, it really does.
It's always fun when you have nuclear powers who are going, well, as long as we don't use guns to fight each other, just sticks and stones,
we can bash each other's heads in. Yeah, we can bash each other's heads in. It's fine.
That is, and again, this is the thing. This is the point I try and make about differences. Because if you said that you transpose that and you had that on the American-Canada border, what would be the perspective on it between America and Canada? Be very different than a perspective between India and China. They're not at war as long as it's sticks and stones, not actual bullets flying. And this is the point you have to think through when we're thinking about what's sea power going to look like, what's the world going to look like if these powers rise up or these powers, and what their involvement is going to be, because they have a different perspective on things.
Yeah. Okay, so very quickly.
For a complete shift in topic here, Dragon, why are you looking at 14th gen Intel?
Mostly because I genuinely don't know of alternatives, and
AMD.
But I don't know enough about AMD.
Can I?
That's why I'm looking into them.
So for the final question, that is a name. That is a lot of Cyrillic characters.
What? You can do it.
Wait, what?
Call him Bob.
Bob.
Just call him Bob.
Which question is
Bob
this?
number 8 asks, what on YouTube asks, what non-naval aircraft, jet or prop do you think would have made a great naval aircraft? Ooh. Laughs. No, silence. No. Bad Fox, we've been over this. No. No Sea Tornado.
What did Foxo say?
No. No Sea Tornado. No.
It would work.
Yeah.
Once. Just like how a naval.
No, it'll work more than once.
Work.
It would entirely work with a minor redesign of the airframe. You just have to replace the landing gear systems, the lower hull, the engine intake,
foldable,
these minor elements.
I mean, hey, it works with the B-25 with less effort.
Foldable tail fin.
Anything is perfect for this.
Yeah. So very quickly, for my opinion, honestly, in terms of aircraft, I would have liked to have seen as naval variants. Oh, come on, Fleet. You used to know the name of this thing off by heart. How can you forget it now? What's it called?
What does it look like?
It's a short, stubby thing with 2 propeller engines used by the US Army. Oh, that's right, the OB-10 Bronco. The OB-10 Bronco. I would have loved to have seen a funny light attack aircraft that could operate like an old school carrier aircraft off of the LHDs. just do full-on, full-stop carrier landings and roll-out takeoffs with bombs slung under the wings. I would have dearly loved to have seen Marine Corps Broncos just doing funny things.
I am unsure what you can strap onto a Bronco.
I know it's a silly option, but it was the only thing I could think of off the top of my head.
You could probably drop hand grenades out of it.
I'm sure the Bronco can carry a little bit of stuff, I'm fairly certain.
It looks like a Skytrain.
Or am I thinking about the Super Bronco? I could be thinking about the Super Bronco.
I think that's a Cessna, right?
Yeah.
No, the Bronco was North American. And Rockwell.
No, different airframe entirely. Oh, the Cessna Skymaster is the push-pull.
Oh, yeah. Oh!
Wait,
which
you did know the Bronco operated from carriers.
Oh my god, it actually... Oh my goodness. Okay, that's actually pretty cool. That's actually pretty cool. I'm not even mad that I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. That's
You need to come up with a new one now.
Alright, okay. New options. Okay. New options for Fleet.
I don't like it when Fleet has options. He usually chooses the most interesting ones.
Does he?
No, I didn't say the worst. I just said the most interesting.
Anyone got the countdown sound?
You can cut it with the sound effect, I'm afraid, Fleet. It's not necessary.
I can't think if he's doing the Jeopardy theme. I can't think. Stop it.
Do you want somebody to go first?
Yeah, someone else go first. Fleet's thinking.
Fine, I'll go first. The Rotodyne. Get on an aircraft carrier, make an ASW helicopter.
I forgot what the question was, so.
Ooh, that'd be a good aircraft for a carrier.
I'm thinking, if you can either stick like torpedoes on it, you can stick anti-shipping missiles on it, you can transport your lads from ship to ship or ship to shore, you can bring on cargo, take it off, it's all good.
Can it transport my crippling lack of self-confidence and respect?
Probably, yes.
That's impressive.
That's...
Okay, so, do you want to know that my next choice is actually probably going to either doom me or is probably going to be an outside context? That is an interesting pick, Rishi. I like that. It's a funny... well,
flying croissant.
Yes. But for me, honestly...
Statistically, it's going to doom you.
So basically, my choice is actually not a combat aircraft. I would have loved to have seen a carrier onboard delivery aircraft for the Kiev-class aircraft carriers. Specifically, a navalized version of the AN-2 biplane.
The what? Sorry?
The AN-2.
The AN-2, the biplane that can.
Yeah, the AN-2.
It's a very short takeoff. It's the one that lands on ice lakes.
Yeah.
But
middle of Siberian Road.
Yeah.
But why?
Because
Fleet, why must you always like the broken things? You can like something that works.
Right out of the box. This to AN2.
I
will stand up for Fleet here. Do not diss the AN2.
I will for what he wants it to do.
Yes, I'm with Dragon on this one.
Right. In terms of what it can do normally, AN2 is fine. Making one for a carrier delivery AN2, what's the bloody point?
Because it's funny.
Why?
Because it's funny.
There's no.
The idea of funny biplane carrier on board delivery asset. It's funny. It's funny.
What are you delivering from it?
I don't know.
Mail.
Porsche, I guess, or vodka.
I'm sure they could deliver mail.
Supplies. Like supplies
but Foxo,
are
you don't need them to deliver. But Foxo, you don't need them to deliver vodka because they've already converted most of the ship to a brewery.
Yeah, but it's more of a case of it's the Soviet version of the DC-3. You can't diss it.
I can diss it when it's taken out of what it. That's like saying, yes, let's make a carrier DC-3 to deliver mail. No!
No, this is a much smaller...
How was some of that was designed, by the way, Dragon?
Not quite, but... And it wasn't for carriers. Yeah, no, not the way you're thinking.
Wait, how are you going to land on an aircraft carrier, especially a Kiev?
Survive a carrier landing
I think,
with
this,
a payload?
This is a good point. So, explain then, Fleet. How is this meant to land on a carrier even after navalization? Like,
it's, well, first of all...
Is it going to, like, Cobra on board?
Well, no, it's an AN2. You could land it on a postage stamp. And to be
No,
blunt...
you think you could land it on a postage stamp.
you do know... There's a bit of a difference though, between a postage stamp and a moving carrier.
That's what the tail hook's for, Dragon.
It's not the tail hook that's the issue.
Yeah,
I'm more
but-
worried about the fact that the carrier outrun an AN2.
Did the Kievs actually have arrestor wires? I'm not actually sure.
They
off the top of
don't,
my
but
head.
the AN2 could do...
You would-
The
so even-
AN2 could...
The hook wouldn't help you here.
The AN2 could do a rolling landing on a Kiev. It has a long enough runway. And
no,
it could also...
just... No. I'm sorry, Fleet. No.
What if I use the turboprop version? Will that make it better?
Even then, Fleet, no.
Fleet, I think
I'd
it's time
rather
to put
use
the
a
crack pipe down.
C-130
No,
for
I am
pod roll.
sticking to my goofy premise, and it's my opinion. It's the only thing I could think of, and I like it, so I'm sticking with it.
You're welcome to stick by it, but I'm welcome.
I've got something that's slightly more cursed than Fleet somehow.
Are you sure about that?
Right, go on.
You've managed to find something more Kirsten's fleet.
We operate the Osprey off a carrier.
We do
We
that.
already do.
We already
That's
did.
You?
done.
No,
Yes.
so do you. The twin rotor one. The one that likes to flip over and smash into things.
They do.
Yeah, we do.
That's the carrier
Yeah.
on-board delivery aircraft for the US
Yeah.
Navy.
I'm a
They got
dumbass.
rid of
Never
Grady.
mind.
22.
Fuck, screw it. DC-3 landing on a carrier. I want to see them do it.
I mean,
They could
probably
land-
I mean,
do it on a
if we want to
If they
be-
could
if we-
land Hercules on carriers, they could land DC-3 on a carrier.
I mean, if we want to be really funny, I could adopt the Antonov AN2E, the funny winged aircraft. That would be...
Is that the ground effect one?
Yes!
That's
Are you
not
land-
carrier on board delivery. That's carrier mid-ocean delivery. If for no other reason than it can't get enough-
Fleet, at that point, that's not an on-carrier aircraft. That's a submarine landing aircraft.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, Oscar class submarine, we heard you wanted more borscht. This is one of the reasons I love about Ramblings. It can be serious, but it can also be very light-hearted, and that is what I do love about it.
Okay, quick
You
question.
can, although I will say
What's
that the current stress relief I've got for dealing with some of the more lighthearted moments is I am currently, how to put this, killing Xenos.
Excellent. Well done. Well done.
Nice.
Glorious.
Are you using grenades?
Yes.
Use
Okay.
more grenades.
Yes, I'm using a lot of grenades.
Also, I will point
Good.
out, Foxo, Knight is very happy we're talking about the AN2 on YouTube. He is very
I know.
happy.
The AN2 is an adorable little goober of an aircraft.
It is very
Yes,
weird
but-
that me and
And
Foxo.
but using it as a
It is very weird that me and
Yeah,
Foxo
it
join
can
arms.
do it, okay?
Yeah.
If it can land on a Siberian river, it can land on an aircraft carrier.
yeah, but like
Moving on.
in what
So
way
very
is
quickly.
the AN2 going to carry enough meaningful things compared to I don't know at my
We are not putting an
28
SU-47 on a
maybe.
carrier, James. No.
Hey,
That's the
That's
less
actually
cursed thing we
pretty-
talked about tonight.
yeah, that's actually not a bad idea.
Oh
I was
my
thinking,
God. Oh my
Actually,
God.
honestly, if you really want a funny one, you stick the Grabinski on a carrier. I'm sure that'll work.
Oh my God.
I can't remember exactly. Benno knows
Why
what
could you
project I'm referring to, but
convert the Griffin?
probably.
Oh no.
So,
Because I want the flappy canards on a carrier.
the flappy
Could
canard.
canards work on carrier aircraft?
Rafal would like a word with you, Foxo.
Yeah, but
So
they're
it's
French. And
doable.
the French don't exist.
What? You can't say the French don't exist. That's not... Right, anyway, so, I have to get up very early tomorrow to take someone to the airport, so we're gonna have to start.
Have you thought of just not sleeping?
No, I'm driving
Who's
over.
jammed you to take to an airport?
I'm driving.
Who is trusting you to take them to the airport?
My uncle.
No, right?
My uncle.
Your vision is
Yes,
obviously impaired.
technically speaking, Fleet, it has been 3 hours, so...
And I will also point out that I have had one accident in my entire driving career. So I'm doing pretty well. Been driving for what? What is it now? Nearly a decade coming up on.
That is even too many.
Good times. Good times. Okay,
That's because
I'm gonna
because
finish.
you are the driving version of Captain Slow?
No, not at all.
How many acts of road rage have you had?
None, actually. Funnily enough, I just don't do road rage. See no point in it.
No, I mean
looking at you,
people
Foster.
on you.
Again, very little. I'm just not.
Okay.
Really.
Looks like
I'm not a bad driver. Funnily enough. Remember, remember, the Fleet you get online is the persona. He's the mask. He's the public-facing Fleet that I put on for the cameras. The Fleet.
Yeah, we've talked to you about that.
Yeah.
But very quickly, thank you everyone for coming. I hope you've all enjoyed. Obviously, for those of you who are aware, tune in tomorrow for Rule the Waves 3, where we are going to bash more heads in as the Confederate Navy. And try not to get the British to come down on us again. But they will, probably.
The Republic shall crush you.
I actually have more. I actually have an equivalent size fleet to the US, and I'm probably going to bash them over the head with a sledgehammer.
Raider.
Who's done anything about it?
Oh, good. Finally got more grenades.
But yeah, anyway,
are you still trying to get that comm relay up?
Anyway, thank you so much for watching, everybody. Take care, and I will catch you all tomorrow. Goodbye.